Chapter 558. In Peak Competition City, Knowing Destiny appeared with Zhao Liusu at the head. The sovereigns of the various sects personally welcomed him. The War of the Five Regions forced the two sides to temporarily put aside their grudges and work together against the enemy. Greetings, advisor. The sovereigns in the hall all bowed. Beside the Alliance Master's seat, there was a seat made of purple gold. A red-robed man sat high up, holding a white fan. He had a gentle and harmless smile on his face. Sovereigns, there's no need to be so courteous, said Ning Chen. Advisor, you are able to put aside your personal enmity and disregard the past to help the five regions fight against the foreign enemies. Such breadth of mind is truly admirable. Venerable Hong Lu stood up and spoke to ease the somewhat tense atmosphere. Ning Chen smiled and said, let's not talk about the misunderstandings of the past anymore. Right now, the most important thing is to focus on dealing with Heaven's Sanctum. The battle reports from the past few days are here. Advisor, please take a look, said Zhao Liusu as she handed over the battle reports. Ning Chen took the reports and carefully read them one by one. He didn't say a word. The sovereigns were waiting in front of him. The Knowing Destiny Marquis was only a legend. Until it was proven, they wouldn't be completely convinced. After a long time, Ning Chen put down the reports and calmly asked, why are you in such a hurry to take back these cities? Zhao Liusu frowned and said, why? Shouldn't we take back the cities that Heaven's Sanctum seized as soon as possible? Are there any important resources around these cities? Ning Chen asked again. Other than a few iron mines, there aren't any special resources, said Zhao Liusu. The Heaven's Sanctum's army has just arrived in the central province. 10 cities are enough for them to use as a base. Zhao Liusu, tell me, how many mistakes have you made in the past few days? Asked Ning Chen calmly. Zhao Liusu thought for a moment and said, First, I wasn't prepared enough for Heaven's Sanctum's arrival. Second, it was difficult to find out the enemy's goal. 10, said Ning Chen slowly. Oh. Zhao Liusu was startled and couldn't react for a moment. Sovereign Xianzhen couldn't stand it anymore and said, Advisor, even if you have some old grudges with the Alliance Sovereign, there's no need to exaggerate his mistakes. Ning Chen looked at Xianzhen Zun in front of him and said indifferently, I've already said that the past is the past. We're just discussing this matter. Then tell me, what are the 10 mistakes that Alliance Venerables made? Xianzhen Venerables asked in disbelief. Firstly, they weren't prepared for the appearance of the Heaven's Sanctum's army. Of the 4 sides of the central region, the Zhao clan and the Xuanji dynasty are in the north. Even the allied army's main camp is here. Since the Heaven's Sanctum has just arrived, they don't have enough troops. They definitely won't choose this place as their base of operations. Furthermore, as for the other 3 sides, the south borders the southern tomb, while the west borders the guardian Buddhist land. Only the east side of the sea region is the divine prefecture of the eastern region, which has just experienced the great tribulation of the underworld king. They don't have many experts, so the threat is the smallest. Therefore, it's not difficult to guess where the Heaven's Sanctum's army will arrive. The east side of the central region is the most convenient place to attack and the easiest place to retreat. Secondly, we weren't able to send troops in time. Even if we missed the best time to ambush them, it wouldn't have been too late to send out troops to stop them when the Heaven's Sanctum arrived. Being cautious and hesitant will only make things worse. This is the inner realm. Whether it's the right time, the right place, or the right people, everything is on our side. This is also the time when the Heaven's Sanctum is least likely to set up a trap. What's the point of waiting and watching? Thirdly, there are no priorities. There are only 2 reasons why the Heaven's Sanctum's army is constantly attacking the cities. One is to attract the attention of the inner realm. They need time. Aside from stabilizing their rear lines, their biggest goal is to transfer troops from the Heaven's Sanctum. During this time, the Allied army didn't attack even once. Fourthly, the responsibility of not investigating. After the Heaven's Sanctum occupies a city, the first thing they do is expel the civilians. Do you really think this is just to make it easier to govern? Right now, the civilians hate the Heaven's Sanctum the most. The headquarters of the various religions are here, and these refugees will head north sooner or later. 1 city of refugees is easy to arrange, and 2 cities won't be a problem. But what about 10 cities? What about 20 cities? When millions of refugees head north and you can't deal with them and can only watch them die, will the people they hate the most still be the heaven's sanctum? Fifthly, it's an unclear mistake. What's the point of taking back the occupied cities? The war has already begun, so there's no need to talk about morality. Since these places have already been lost, there's no need to waste troops and energy to take them back. If the heaven's sanctum is willing to split up their forces, then let them. What we need to do is not lose new cities and increase the number of refugees. Sixthly, advisor, there's no need to say any more. On the seat of honor, Zhao Liusu stopped the former from continuing. Her pretty face was already pale. She stood up, walked forward, and respectfully bowed. Military advisor, please tell us what to do next. I need military power, absolute military power, said Ningchen coldly. Zhao Liusu was silent for a moment. A moment later, she took out half a purple jade talisman and handed it over. This talisman contains a trace of the soul imprint of all the chosen in the alliance. Although it has been split in 2, no one knows where their soul imprint is. As long as you have this talisman, you have the power to mobilize the Central Plains army. Ningchen took the jade talisman and scanned it with his spiritual sense. Sure enough, he felt several powerful auras. A trace of a soul was very important even to a chosen. Once it was destroyed, although they wouldn't die, they would be heavily injured. Ningchen raised his head and looked at the experts standing at the peak of the human world. He said calmly, "Everyone, the war officially begins now. Exalt Li, immediately send someone to inform Bai Li and Mu Hua that they don't need to fight for the lost cities anymore. They need to focus on cooperating with Exalt Chi Wei to stop the Heavenly Province's army. Exalt Hong Lu, immediately arrange for the refugees. Remember, be careful of those who spread rumors and take advantage of the situation. Once discovered, kill without mercy." Speaking up to here, Ningchen paused for a moment. He glanced at the 3 exalts on the right and continued, "Also, Exalt Xianzhen, Exalt Yuxing, and Exalt Qinyu, the 3 of you will come with me to explore the 10 cities behind the Heavenly Province and find out how they're mobilizing their troops from the Heavenly Province planets." The 5 exalts respectfully accepted the order. "Is there anything you need me to do?" asked Zhao Liusu on the side. Ningchen looked away and said calmly, "There is. Alliance Exalt's mission is to protect competitive Peak City. I don't want to return to find that this place has already become a place where the Heavenly Province has ambushed their troops." Zhao Liusu nodded and said, "Don't worry. As long as I'm alive, no one from the Heavenly Province planet will be able to step into this city. One last thing. That sword exalt is quite troublesome. Tell Senior Yaoguang to be prepared to act at any time," reminded Ningchen. "Don't worry about that. The Yaoguang King has already been cultivating his sword for several days. As long as the Heavenly Province sword exalt appears, he will immediately act to stop him," said Zhao Liusu. Hearing that, Ningchen nodded. This was the most unpredictable part. No matter how brilliant a plan was, it still needed a powerful force to support it. Otherwise, it would be meaningless. Absolute power was always the most effective way to decide the outcome of a war. Up until now, the Heavenly Province Star Exalt that he had been wary of still hadn't appeared. There was an 80 to 90% chance that he was heavily injured while destroying the Netherworld King's formation. The most important thing was that this war that seemed to be evenly matched had to end before the Heavenly Province Star Exalt appeared. Otherwise, the 5 regions would be in an extremely disadvantageous position. In the eastern part of the Central Plains, Xiao Bieli stood silently in one of the 10 cities. At this moment, a black-robed Xiantian expert appeared in the distance. He half knelt and said, "Minister of Heaven, the inner world's sects have changed their direction." "Where did they go?" A strange light flashed in Xiao Bieli's eyes. "The 2 sovereigns, Bai Li and Mu Hua, who were in charge of taking back the cities we occupied, have already led their troops to the southwest. Their target should be Senior Chi Wei," replied the kneeling Xiantian expert. "Yes, I understand. You can leave for now," said Xiao Bieli calmly. "Yes." The black-robed Xiantian expert accepted the order and vanished in the blink of an eye. Xiao Bieli glanced back at the formations in the city, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Is it a coincidence, or has the leader of the inner realm finally become enlightened? If it's the latter, then this war probably won't be as boring as it was before. The sun was setting in the west, and a crescent moon was slowly rising in the eastern sky. A cold wind blew across the land that had been eroded by war. Everywhere was desolate and bleak. As the night deepened, four figures appeared 100 miles away from the 10 cities. Their auras were completely concealed. The person in the lead was wearing red robes that looked like they were dyed in blood under the night sky. Xian Zhen, Yuxing, Qin Yu, the 3 sovereigns will each investigate the 3 cities. In 2 hours, gather here. Remember, if you're exposed, don't worry about anything. Immediately retreat, said Ning Chen. Understood. The 3 venerables nodded in response, and then their figures flashed as they headed off in different directions. Once the 3 sovereigns left, Ning Chen looked at the city in front of him and walked over. Of the 10 cities, the Minister of Heaven was most likely to be in this city. Hopefully his guess was correct. Heavenly Huan City was covered in dense formations. Lines of formation runes rose into the air, and every part of it was shining with a strange light. Within the formation, there were 4 sovereigns using their bodies as the foundation to maintain the formation's operation. Outside the formation, the Sword Sovereign and the Minister of Heaven were silently standing. Ever since they had arrived at the Heavenly Palace, they hadn't taken half a step away. The forbidden area was heavily guarded, and no one was allowed to approach. Not even the people of the Heavenly Palace were allowed to approach. Minister of Heaven. At this moment, a black-robed Xiantian expert appeared 300 meters away and knelt. What is it? Asked Xiao Bieli. Our scouts have reported that an unfamiliar red-robed youth appeared in Peak Competition City today. He seems to have attracted the attention of the sovereigns of the inner world, reported the black-robed Xiantian expert. Oh! Xiao Bieli's eyes lit up when he heard this. Investigate again. Chapter 559. Red stood outside Tianheng City. Tian Xiang stood quietly in Tianheng City. More than a decade ago, Knowing Destiny and Military Counselor confronted each other. Now, the real battle between the wise men had reappeared in the world. There were very few people in the world who could bear the title of a wise man. More than 10 years ago, Fan Lingyue ruled the world and single-handedly brought the Northern Meng imperial court to its peak. He raised the definition of a wise man to an unprecedented height. Since then, the divine prefecture could be called a wise man. That was Fan Lingyue's era. He was like the only moon in the sky, shining on the world. No one could hide his brilliance. Even the 5 most powerful innate masters were overshadowed by him. Later, Luoyue of Luoyue City, Zhong Qianxiu, and Xianji appeared one after another. They seemed to have inherited the title of wise man. However, Knowing Destiny was very clear that after Fan Lingyue, there were no more wise men in the divine land. Even if Qianxiu and Xuanji weren't bad, at most they weren't bad. The reason why Grand Xia was so tired of dealing with them was because before that, Fan Lingyue had almost crippled the invincible Grand Xia. The biggest difficulty of the chaos of the 4 extremes was the timing of its appearance. The real threat of the Eternal Night sect was the hierarch of the Eternal Night, who seemed to be the most powerful man in the world. In that era, the only person who could fight Mu Bai to a standstill without using his own weapon was the Eternal Night sect master. At that time, Knowing Destiny only took 2 strikes from Mu Bai. After that, Yama, who came to the world, had nothing to do with the word wise man at all. He had absolute power and didn't need any wisdom to serve as a foil. In just 10 years, Knowing Destiny's opponent went from the most wise man in the world, Fan Lingyue, to Yama, who had the power to destroy everything. He had seen the peak. Now that he experienced the same thing again, he gradually calmed down. After Heaven's Sanctum descended, Ning Chen had seen everything the Celestial had done. Without a doubt, this person was an extraordinary opponent. Every step he took was impeccable, far surpassing the likes of Zhong Qianxiu and Xianji. If Fan Lingyue looked at the world and found something strange, Then this Tianxiang was careful and didn't leave any flaws. The Minister of the Land of Abundance was not an empty title. Before that star venerable appeared, this man was undoubtedly the biggest enemy of the 5 regions. Outside Heavenly Eternal City, Ningchen quietly looked at the city in front of him. He didn't take a single step in for 2 whole hours. In Eternal Heaven City, Xiao Bieli was deep in thought. The red-robed young man reminded him of White Jade Jing, a young swordsman whom he admired. However, it was unlikely that these 2 people were the same person. When Bai Yujing left the Heaven's Mansion, the Underworld King's boundary hadn't been broken yet. The people of the inner realm couldn't leave and the people of the outer realm couldn't enter. 2 hours later, 50 kilometers away from Eternal Heaven City, Xianzhen, Yusheng, and Qingyu returned. At this moment, a calm voice sounded. 3 sovereigns, please come to Eternal Heaven City. When the 3 venerables heard this, they looked at each other. Suppressing the shock in their hearts, they quickly rushed forward. Outside the city, Ningchen turned around to glance at the 3 of them and said, "How is it? Did you discover anything?" Reporting to the military advisor, "We didn't find anything special," said the Xuanzhen Reverend. "Military advisor, there's only 1 city left that we haven't explored," said the Yusheng Reverend. Ningchen nodded. Looking at the city, he said, "There's no need to explore it. The Heaven's Mansion's army source is in this city. Now, it's up to you to destroy it." The 3 of them were surprised. Reverend Qingyu cautiously asked, "Military advisor, is that sword sovereign in this city?" "He is," said Ningchen calmly. "Military advisor, with that person around, we won't be able to charge through," said the Xuanzhen Reverend. "If the sword sovereign takes action, the Alcade King will also take action," said Ningchen indifferently. The 3 sovereigns were silent. They had all seen how terrifying the sword sovereign was. The Alcade King was far away in Sunset Divine City. Whether or not he could stop the sword sovereign was unknown. This was undoubtedly a gamble with their lives. Whether you go or not is up to you. I can only tell you that after tonight, it'll be very difficult for you to have another chance, said Ningchen casually. Any brilliant plan required a powerful force to support it. If the 3 sovereigns couldn't make up their minds to enter the city, then tonight's operation would be meaningless. It was impossible for there to be no Heaven's Mansion spies in competitive Peak City. Once Tianxiang learned that he was the military advisor of the 5 regions, there would be no chance for him to destroy the city. Of course, after tonight, he wouldn't use those who didn't listen to him anymore. Military advisor, let's think about it at length. If the Alcade King can't stop the Heaven's Mansion sword sovereign, not just the 3 of us, but even you will be in danger. The 3 of them hesitated for a moment before Reverend Yu Sheng stepped forward. Ningchen smiled faintly and didn't say anything more. He turned and walked north. He didn't have a phoenix body, and he had no feelings for this world. He had already given them a chance, but they didn't cherish it. Then he would take more lives to make up for it. The 3 sovereigns followed and left together. Ningchen and the 3 sovereigns returned to competitive Peak City. Zhao Liusu immediately went up to greet them. Military advisor, how was it? Did you find the source of the Heaven's Mansion's army? Ningchen nodded. Did you destroy it? Asked Zhao Liusu. No, the city is guarded by the sword sovereign. The 3 sovereigns were worried about my safety, so they suggested we think about it at length, smiled Ningchen. Zhao Liusu was stunned when she heard this, and then she swiftly understood what was going on. She glanced at Xianzhen, Yusheng, and Qingyu before she said in a low voice, "The 3 of you leave first. I have something to discuss with the military advisor." The 3 of them bowed and left. After the 3 sovereigns left, only Zhao Liusu and Ningchen remained in the hall. The atmosphere was extremely tense. Military advisor, you clearly know the importance of this trip. Why didn't you give the order for the 3 of them to attack the city? Asked Zhao Liusu. It's rare that the alliance sovereigns don't know what it means to agree on the surface but oppose on the surface. They're already afraid. Once the sword sovereign attacks, do you think they'll resist or run? Smiled Ningchen. Zhao Liusu clenched her fists, unable to suppress the fury in her heart. She knew that these sovereigns weren't easy to control, which was why she had suggested using the Jade Talisman to control them. She hadn't expected that it would still be so difficult to command them at such a crucial moment. "Is there any other way?" asked Zhao Liusu, raising her head. Ning Chen's lips curved. "My mission is just to mobilize the troops to fight against the Heavenly Sanctum's leader. As for how to control them, that's not my responsibility. Alliance Sovereign, you should think about it yourself." Zhao Liusu's heart skipped a beat. She clenched her fists so hard that they turned pale. Taking a deep breath, she said, "Is there a chance to salvage the situation tomorrow night? If not, how much of an impact will it have on this battle?" "The opportunity has already been lost, and there's no way to salvage it. As for the impact," Ning Chen smiled, "if we make a mistake, we'll just have to use lives to make up for it. As for how many lives will be needed, you'll know in the future. After waiting for an entire night, I'm sure you're tired. I won't disturb you any longer. I'll take my leave first." Ning Chen didn't stay any longer. He turned and walked out of the hall. Bang! Ning Chen walked out of the main hall. Inside the hall, the sound of something being smashed into pieces could be heard. The entire main hall shook violently. Such a shocking commotion was enough to show how furious the person inside was. In front of the hall, the two guards trembled. Looking at the red-clothed person walking out, they lowered their heads. They didn't understand what the military advisor had said to the Alliance Sovereign to make the Alliance Sovereign so angry. Ning Chen sneered. He didn't care when this battle would end. The only reason he agreed to stay was because he needed this identity as a cover. The Phoenix body's warning was right. The human heart could be trusted, but it could never be trusted completely. The three sovereigns' temporary retreat would make the entire central continent pay the most painful price. Once the war began, there weren't many opportunities for both sides. Wasting one was one less. Originally, the central continent had the geographical advantage. As long as they destroyed the Heavenly Sanctum source of soldiers, the inner realm would have the absolute advantage for a short period of time. Even if they didn't use any schemes, they would be able to deal a heavy blow to the Heavenly Sanctum. However, from today onward, they would no longer have this advantage. Ning Chen. Just as Ning Chen walked 100 steps out of the hall, Qing Ning, who had rushed over after hearing the news, called out to him. "Qing Ning. Sister Qing Ning." Ning Chen regained his senses. He paused for a moment and then called out in an unaccustomed manner. When Qing Ning heard this, her beautiful eyes narrowed and she said, "Follow me." Hearing this, Ning Chen stepped forward and followed. After walking for a quarter of an hour, Qing Ning walked into a quiet side hall. Then she stopped. Ning Chen also stopped. His eyes were filled with confusion. Qing Ning turned around and said, "The current you is the demonic body he spoke of, right?" Ning Chen's heart trembled. How could this be? When had he revealed a flaw? There's nothing to be surprised about. Qing Ning walked up and closed the door. She softly said, "I picked you up and brought you into the palace. I also watched you grow up step by step. Others might not be able to see your change, but it's impossible to hide it from me." Ning Chen's body stiffened. After a long time, he gradually relaxed. "You're not nervous anymore?" Qing Ning smiled and walked up to hit his head. "Whether you're a human or a demon, you Qing Ning will always be your sister Qing Ning. There's no difference. Do you remember?" Ning Chen stiffly nodded. "When the sun rises, come with me to the sword-casting manor. I heard you injured the sword-casting manor. This matter can't be dragged on. The sword-casting manor has always been upright and has never offended you. Since you injured him, then you have to bear the consequences of your mistake." Qing Ning calmly said. Now that the Empress wasn't here, only she could take care of him. A mistake was a mistake. Whether it was the Phoenix body or the demon body, they both had to bear the consequences of their actions. "Yes." Ning Chen nodded once more and softly replied. Eternal Heaven City. When the first rays of the morning sun shone down, a black-clothed Xiantian cultivator appeared and respectfully said, "Minister of Heaven, the information has been verified. That red-clothed young man is the military advisor of the 5 regions. This is the portrait sent over by the scouts." Xiao Bieli waved his hand and received the portrait. After looking at it, his pupils constricted. "It's him." Xiao Bieli waved his hand and destroyed the portrait. He solemnly said, "Order Zhenyang, Dong Sun, Tian Du, and Tai Xian to immediately defend Eternal Heaven City." Chapter 560. In the northwest of Zhongzhou, two people were walking forward. The woman in the blue dress was beautiful and had an extraordinary temperament. Qing Ning, who had followed Zhang Sun since she was a child, had some of Zhang Suan's shadow in her. She was gentle and reserved, but also dignified. Ning Chen followed beside Qing Ning. His eyes were less arrogant and indifferent, but more peaceful and peaceful. In the knowing destiny state, although the devil's body was an anomaly, the three bodies were originally one and would eventually affect each other. It was unavoidable. If there were people in the knowing destiny state who could completely trust, Qing Ning would definitely be at the top of the list. The closer they got to the sword-casting villa, the slower Ning Chen walked. The rejection in his heart became more and more obvious. The devil's body was proud and cold. How could it apologize to others easily? If Qing Ning hadn't spoken, he probably wouldn't have stepped into the sword-casting villa in this life. Qing Ning stopped and looked at Ning Chen, who was walking slower and slower. A dangerous smile appeared on her face. She said, "Do you need me to drag you along?" Ning Chen looked at the beautiful smile on Qing Ning's face. His body trembled subconsciously and he quickened his pace. Qing Ning's smile didn't fade, but became much gentler. As she walked, she asked softly, "Ning Chen, do you know why the devil is not accepted by the world?" "Because the devil won't follow the rules set by humans," Ning Chen answered after a moment of silence. Qing Ning nodded with a smile. She said, "You're right. Humans fear the devil because there used to be a devil who harmed the world. The devil who harmed the world didn't follow any rules of the human world. A person's memory is very complicated. Kindness and affection are mostly fleeting. But the fear of the past will be remembered for a lifetime and even passed down for thousands of years. They deserve to die." Ning Chen's eyes flashed with coldness and murderous intent. "Jingxin." Qing Ning put her hand in front of Ning Chen's heart and said softly, "I don't care about anyone in Zhongzhou. Even if you kill them all, I won't blame you. But killing is a habit. It will slowly make you lose yourself. One day, you will lose yourself and feel that everything can be solved by killing. It's hard to turn back. Do you understand?" Ning Chen shook his head. Qing Ning put down her hand and looked to the east. She said, "You should know why you have this body." Ning Chen nodded. "This is the reason." Qing Ning sighed softly and said, "In order to stop the Netherworld King, the Phoenix body and Fan Lingyue sacrificed millions of innocent people in the Divine Prefecture. Fan Lingyue used the last of his soul to repay the world. However, in order to resurrect the ghost girl, he lived on at all costs. As I said just now, if you kill too many people, you will lose yourself. Your existence is because of the negative emotions that he has been suppressing in his heart. Is my appearance a mistake?" Ning Chen's eyes gradually turned cold as he asked. Qing Ning shook her head and said, "You and he are the same person. It's just that you've separated. In some ways, you're even better than the knowing destiny state." When Ning Chen heard this, the coldness in his eyes dissipated and a trace of confusion appeared. He asked, "Where?" "Follow your heart." Qing Ning replied softly, "The knowing destiny state is a human body. Although he is smarter and more rational than everyone in the world, he can't escape the bondage of love after all. He rushes about because of love and treats the world well because of love. You are a demon, and you don't see love as much as he does. Perhaps this little bit of humanity left is only because you are influenced by the other two souls. If you are not trapped by love, your life will not be so tiring." "Sister Qing Ning, why did you bring me here? Apologizing is not something a demon should do." Ning Chen snorted coldly. "Responsibility." Qing Ning said calmly, "You have to bear the consequences of your own actions. It's a good thing to follow your heart, but you can't act recklessly. I can't control the former devil, but I can't control you. The sects in the central province have wronged you. You can seek revenge on them, but Sword Forging Villa has never wronged you. Therefore, you have to admit this mistake. Whether you're willing or not, there's no room for discussion. I'm your sister, so you have to listen to me." Ning Chen nodded and didn't quibble anymore. Perhaps he was really influenced by the other two souls. Every time he argued with Qing Ning, it was more difficult than facing a supreme master. Moreover, he didn't seem to reject this little bit of humanity in his heart. Apologize? No matter what, it was easier than facing Qing Ning, who could go crazy at any time. They quickened their pace and got closer to Sword Forging Villa. Although they were still far away, they could vaguely see the frost and flame mountains that had been destroyed in the previous battle. At sunset, they finally arrived at Sword Forging Villa. The once famous sword-forging family gradually chose to live in seclusion after the swordmaster was seriously injured. They no longer interfered with the affairs of the central province. In front of the villa, 2 doormen were guarding. Their cultivation was not bad, almost reaching the Khanate realm. For their age, it was already a good level. Honorable guests, please wait. The villa is not receiving guests now. When the 2 approached, one of the doormen stepped forward and stopped them. We are here to visit the sword master. Please make an exception, Qing Ning said sincerely. Sorry, the sword master is not seeing anyone now. Please go back. The doorman refused again. Seeing that the 2 refused to let them go, Ning Chen frowned. He was about to step forward when Qing Ning glared at him. Brother Bai. Just as Qing Ning was about to speak again, a little girl with braided hair who looked to be about 12 or 13 years old saw the 2 of them and jogged over, beaming with joy. Qing Ning's eyes narrowed and she turned around with a questioning gaze. Ning Chen did not reply. He tried his best to show a bright smile and looked at the little girl. I haven't seen you in 3 or 4 years. You've grown so big. Brother Bai, where's Sister Bai? Looked around but did not see Bai Yunlian. She was slightly disappointed. Your sister Bai is busy and did not come. But we want to see the sword master. Bring us in, Ning Chen said seriously. You're looking for Grandpa Sword Master? Inder's eyes flashed with a strange light. She thought for a moment and said to the doorman, let them in. They are my friends. Yes, young miss. The 2 doormen said respectfully. After they finished speaking, they stepped aside and no longer blocked the way. Brother Bai, where have you and Sister Bai been all these years? Why haven't you come to see even once? Turned around and complained as she led the way. We went on a long trip. As soon as we came back, we came to see you, Ning Chen replied. Qing Ning was helpless. Her ability to spout nonsense had not changed at all. Not long after you and Sister Bai left, Grandpa Sword Master ordered the manor to be sealed. I couldn't go out either. I thought you 2 would never come to see me again, muttered. Aren't we here now? Ning Chen smiled. Brother Bai, when you see Grandpa Sword Master later, can you ask him to take me out to play for a few days? Turned around again and asked with a longing look on her face. Ning Chen looked at Qing Ning for help. Qing Ning ignored him. Her attitude was very clear. She had caused the trouble herself, so she had to solve it herself. Ning Chen looked at the little girl unnaturally and tactfully refused. There is still a war outside. It's very dangerous. Wait a few more days. Seemed to understand something and nodded. A trace of loneliness flashed in her eyes. It was very faint, but it was clear enough to make one's heart ache. Right? Qing Ning revealed a gentle smile and said, your brother Bai is just joking with you. There is indeed a war outside. However, he is a military advisor and doesn't need to go to the battlefield. When he sees Grandpa Sword Master later, your brother Bai will plead for you. When heard this, her lonely face immediately brightened up. She nodded vigorously and said, thank you, sister. Thank you, Bai. Before she could finish speaking, the little girl snorted. She was clearly angry with someone. Ning Chen looked at Qing Ning in confusion. How could he take a little girl with him now? Grandpa Sword Master, Brother Bai is here. In front of a study room, knocked on the door and said crisply, come, wait outside. As he spoke, the door creaked open. Inside, an old man in a wheelchair appeared in front of the 2 of them. Nodded obediently and stopped in front of the door. She did not enter. Ning Chen and Qing Ning walked in. Seeing the old man in the room, Ning Chen politely bowed. Greetings, Grandpa Sword Master. Who is this lady? Master Sword Forger glanced at Ning Chen before shifting his gaze to the woman in the green dress. Qing Ning, Ning Chen's older sister, replied Qing Ning. Hearing this, a strange look flashed across Swordsmith's old eyes. The world-famous Jiming Marquis had a sister? May I ask why the two of you have come? Asked Grandpa Swordmaster. We came to apologize. Qing Ning said, back then, there was a problem with my younger brother's cultivation. The demonic body left my body and injured Grandpa Swordmaster. Although it wasn't my younger brother's intention, a mistake is a mistake. Today, Qing Ning has brought my younger brother here to apologize to Grandpa Swordmaster for what happened back then. Grandpa Swordmaster frowned and said, what about the demonic body? The demonic chi that erupted from the demonic will ocean was extremely shocking. Suppressing it won't be easy. The demonic body has already been exiled to the outer heavens. It won't be able to return in its lifetime, said Ning Chen calmly. Grandpa Swordmaster nodded and sighed emotionally. That's good. As long as the world doesn't suffer from the demonic disaster, my injuries are worth it. Ning Chen was silent. A moment later, he waved his hand and a blood-red sword surrounded by demonic chi appeared and landed in front of Grandpa Swordmaster. Grandpa Swordmaster, I injured you back then. Today, I'll return the favor. This time I won't fight back. After this sword, we'll be even. Forget it, I'm old. If I'm crippled, then so be it. You're still young. As long as you know you're wrong, that's enough. I only hope that you can be a little more forgiving when you face the grudges between the Central Continent's sections. People's hearts are easily tainted. You can't kill all of them. Grandpa Swordmaster looked at Qing Ning and said gently, Miss Qing Ning, Jiming Marquis is truly fortunate to have an older sister like you. Chapter 561. The great Xia Jiming Marquis, who had never lowered his head in his entire life, admitted his mistake in front of an elder with crippled legs. Qing Ning stood to the side and watched quietly. No matter what happened in the past or in the future, a mistake was a mistake. The elder sister was like a mother. Her mother was no longer here, so she was the only one who could take care of it. The sword master accepted the bow, but he did not pick up the sword in front of him. Forgiveness was not easy, and it was even harder to repay kindness with evil. As a member of the Central Plains, the sword master showed the temperament of a grandmaster. Crimson Drill is the Crimson Drill demon sword from 4,000 years ago. It has been stained with the blood of countless people, and its resentment is extraordinary. Now I have no strength to guard it. If this sword falls into the hands of evil people, it will become a disaster. Jiming Marquis, since you pulled out this sword, you have the responsibility to guard it and not let it fall into the hands of others. The sword master waved his hand and returned the sword. Sword master, are you not worried that I am the source of the disaster? Ning Chen asked slowly. The great Xia Jiming Marquis who once protected the world with his life cannot be the source of the disaster, the sword master replied. Hearing this, Ning Chen fell silent. After a long while, he said indifferently, I will give the sects of the Central Plains a chance, but only once. It is to repay the sword master's kindness today. Thank you. The sword master said seriously. Back then, the sects of the Central Plains had gathered all the forces of the world and still could not kill the young man in front of him. Now that he had returned alive, with his intelligence and strength, if he really wanted to take revenge, the entire Central Plains would fall into panic. Seeing that the serious matter was over and the atmosphere was becoming stiff, Qing Ning stepped forward and said politely, Sword Master, it is late. There are still some things to deal with in competitive Peak City. We will return first. The world is chaotic. Be careful, the Sword Master instructed. Okay. Qing Ning nodded. Looking at the people beside her, she turned and walked out of the study. Ning Chen followed, but after a few steps, he stopped and said, Sword Master, wants to go out. Hearing this, the Sword Master thought for a moment and said, Sorry to trouble you. Ning Chen understood what the Sword Master meant and walked away. On the way back to competitive Edge City, the group of 2 became 3, with the addition of a little girl with braided hair. She was beaming with joy and chattering nonstop. When dawn broke, the 3 of them returned to competitive Edge City. Qing Ning returned to her palace while Yin stayed by Ning Chen's side. You're lying. You're called Ning Chen, not White Jade Jing. Yin pouted unhappily. During that period of time, it was called White Jade Capital, Ning Chen casually said. I don't want to be with you. I want to find Big Sister Bai, Yin protested. Your Big Sister Bai isn't here right now. I don't know where she went, Ning Chen replied. You're lying to me. Yin no longer trusted him. I'm not lying to you, Ning Chen denied. One adult and one child, one human and one demon. Strangely, they didn't have any communication barriers. Facing a little girl who wasn't a threat at all, the demon's instinctive wariness decreased a lot. As she drank tea, she thought about things and answered the little girl's questions intermittently. Outside the palace, Qing Ning looked at Wenxian Palace not far away and smiled faintly. It seemed that bringing that little girl here was the right choice. Although the demon's body was trying its best to imitate the phoenix body, it still lacked the warmth and coldness of human nature. It might not be a problem in the short term, but in the long term, it might arouse suspicion. Qing Ning, Master just sent news that your third senior sister has also come down the mountain. Bai Lingling walked up and said, Third senior sister? Hearing this, Qing Ning's eyes flashed with surprise. Third senior sister was also coming. Third senior sister was a true genius among geniuses on the mountain. Perhaps this kind of phrase wasn't enough to describe how terrifying her talent was. The most powerful person on the mountain was undoubtedly Master. The other person was eldest senior sister. She cultivated the clear sky glass art and was between half venerable and human supreme. She wasn't a supreme, but she was even stronger than a supreme. The third person was third senior sister. She was also at the peak of half venerable. However, because of her cultivation, she was slightly weaker than eldest senior sister. Your third senior sister has broken through to the peak stage, Bai Lingling said again. How is that possible? Qing Ning was shocked. After a while, the shock on her face gradually faded. Perhaps nothing was impossible for her third senior sister. Master sent your third senior sister down the mountain. Other than supporting the Central Plains sects, there should be some other mission. However, this girl's actions are too worrisome. Qing Ning, if you have time, keep an eye on her, Bai Lingling said helplessly. Okay. Qing Ning nodded and didn't refuse. Compared to her terrifying talent, she was more famous for her terrifying personality. When she thought up to here, Qing Ning couldn't help but be slightly worried. Presently, the situation in the central prefecture was already so chaotic, so third senior sister's arrival would only add to the chaos. Moreover, this clone of Ning Chen's wasn't easy to deal with as well, so they would definitely fight each other when they encountered each other. Just as the two of them were talking, a guard quickly walked over from outside Wenxian Palace. He half knelt and respectfully said, Advisor, the Alliance Lord requests to see you. Understood. You can leave now. Yes. Not long after, Ning Chen walked out of the palace and walked towards the conference hall on the other side. Behind him, Yin followed him like a little tail. Although she said she didn't want to be with a certain someone, she still followed him. Within the conference hall, Zhao Liusu quietly waited. When she saw the little girl behind Ning Chen, she frowned at first, but she quickly covered it up. Advisor, there's progress in the battle. Also, the other 3 regions have sent new peak experts over. They should be here in 2 days, said Zhao Liusu. Ning Chen picked up the battle reports from the east and read them one by one. Then he raised his head and asked, Who are the experts they sent? There's a human sovereign from each of the 3 regions, but, at this point, Zhao Liusu changed the topic. She hesitated for a moment before continuing. The sovereign from West Buddha's homeland has just entered the perfection stage. However, there's something wrong with his personality. Now is a crucial time for the 5 territory alliance. If these people offend you in any way, I hope that you can forgive them. Hearing this, Ning Chen's eyes slightly narrowed. A newly advanced sovereign was actually able to make Zhao Liusu, the leader of the 5 territory alliance, give him special instructions. It seemed that the sovereign from West Buddha's homeland wasn't someone easy to deal with. At the same time, in the west of Zhongzhou, a girl in a green dress appeared. She walked alone in the boundless wilderness. Shiyao Mountain's third senior sister, Shi Piaoxiu. She was the one with the most terrifying talent on the mountain for countless years. She didn't put much effort into cultivation, but it didn't stop her cultivation from progressing much faster than anyone of the same age on the mountain. Everyone on the mountain was a genius, but Shi Piaoxiu was a genius among geniuses. After 100 miles, a mountain blocked her path. However, Shi Piaoxiu didn't stop at all. She broke through every mountain she encountered. Step by step, the entire mountain collapsed. Sand and pebbles flew everywhere as it was split into two. Chapter 562. In competitive Peak City, the Alliance Venerables and Advisor June were sitting on both sides of the hall. They were discussing how to fight against Heaven's Sanctum. In the first battle of Heaven's Sanctum, Zhongzhou had lost 3 Venerables. Including the injured Supreme Bodhi and the half-crippled Palace Lord Taibai, the 5 regions' Venerables had suffered a great loss. The 8 Venerables under them all had solemn expressions. Apart from the 8 of them, Venerables Mu Hua, Qi Wei, and Bailey each led an army to stop Heaven's Sanctum from expanding. Venerables Hong Lu had to deal with the refugees and wouldn't be able to return in a short period of time. The only good news was that 3 more Venerables from Nanling, Beiyuan, and Shitu had come to support Zhongzhou. Ning Chen quietly listened to the Venerables' discussion. He didn't say a word from start to finish. Venerables Li, why haven't the reinforcements arrived yet? Zhao Liusu asked from the main seat. Since the start of the war, Zhongzhou's sects have suffered great losses. It won't be easy to get more reinforcements, Venerables Li replied. What about the other 3 regions? When will their reinforcements arrive? Zhao Liusu looked at Venerables Qingyu and asked. At least a month, Venerables Qingyu replied. Bang. Hearing this, Zhao Liusu slapped the armrest and sat up. She said coldly, a month? How long has it been delayed? Report. At this moment, a guard ran in from outside the hall and knelt down. Heaven's Sanctum has sent a letter to Advisor June. Send it in, Zhao Liusu said. The guard entered the hall and handed over the letter. Ning Chen took the letter and glanced at it. His lips curled up. As expected, they still came. Advisor, what's the matter? Zhao Liusu asked. Ning Chen handed the letter to her and said calmly, someone wants to see you. Zhao Liusu frowned. After reading the letter, she reminded, Advisor June, be careful. Just catching up. Alliance Venerables, don't worry, Ning Chen smiled and replied. Let Venerables Li and Hong Lu accompany Advisor June, Zhao Liusu said, still worried. There's no need. Ning Chen stood up and shook his head. Everyone, please continue your discussion. I'll take my leave first. After he finished speaking, Ning Chen didn't stay any longer and strode out of the hall. After the military advisor left, the 8 human supremes looked at each other. Venerable Xianzhen hesitated for a moment and said, Alliance Venerable, does this Marquis Jiming really want to help the central region fight against Heaven's Mansion? These days, he didn't give any suggestions, nor did he express any opinions about our decisions. It's obvious that he still can't let go of the old grudges. Let go? Zhao Liusu's tone turned cold. She looked at the person in front of her and said, Xianzhen Zun, I don't know if Jiming Marquis has let go of the past grudges, but the wise man gives his plans, and the martial artist shows his strength. The division of labor is clear. If the order can't be stopped, no matter how good the plan is, it's useless. Hearing this, Xianzhen Reverend's body froze. He couldn't argue anymore and fell silent. In Wenxian Palace, Ning Chen walked back. When he didn't see Yin, he walked out again. In the city, on the bustling streets, a 12 or 13-year-old girl was strolling by herself. She was already holding a large pile of things in her arms, but she still looked around with interest. Ning Chen appeared and followed far behind. He knew that the phoenix body had once used phoenix blood to cleanse Yin Er's foundation. In addition, the little girl's talent was not bad. At such a young age, she was already a 5th stage natal stage expert. He more or less guessed Qing Ning's purpose. He lacked some humanity. Ordinary people might not be able to see it, but he couldn't guarantee that the human sovereign stage experts wouldn't be suspicious. Morning, afternoon, and then dusk. The facts once again proved how terrifying a woman could be when shopping, even if she was only a 12 or 13-year-old girl. As the sun set, there were fewer stalls on the streets. Only then did reluctantly carry her pile of things back along the road she came from. When the little girl approached, Ning-chen called out. Turned her head from behind the small mountain of things in her arms. Seeing the person in front of her, she asked, "Why are you looking for me?" "I'm going to see a friend." "Come with me," Ning-chen said. Shook her little head vigorously and refused. Ning-chen narrowed his eyes. This little girl was not as easy to fool as she was when she was 7 or 8 years old. "Stay here by yourself. No one will take care of you." Ning-chen continued to persuade her. "Sister Qing-ning is here." Continued to shake her head. "Your sister Qing-ning went to pick up her senior sister." "She's not in the city," Ning-chen said. "I have money. I can take care of myself." Looked at her little pouch and refused to give in. "Then I'm leaving. You can stay here by yourself. If anyone bullies you, don't regret it. Don't forget that although some people in the city are very polite to me on the surface, they actually hate me. If I'm not here, sigh." After speaking, Ning-chen shook his head and turned to leave the city. When heard this, she immediately jogged 2 steps to catch up. Her eyes curved as she said, "I'm going too." "Don't force yourself," Ning-chen said reasonably. "I won't." Smiled. Thus, the two of them left competitive Peak City and headed towards the southeast. 2 days later, in the east of Central Plains, 2 cups of tea were served in front of the battle between the 2 armies. Xiao Bieli waited patiently for Ji Ming to appear. Just as the appointed time was about to arrive, a red-robed figure appeared in the distance. He walked over step by step. When the allied army saw him, they immediately parted to welcome him. "As expected you came?" Xiao Bieli stood up and calmly looked at him. "It would be impolite to refuse an invitation from the heavens." Ning-chen smiled. "Please sit." Xiao Bieli extended his hand. "Many thanks." Ning-chen didn't stand on ceremony and sat down. "Now, should I call you Sir Bai or Jiming Marquis?" asked Xiao Bieli. "It's just a name. Do as you wish." Xiao Bieli smiled. "I never thought that after parting in the heavenly sanctum, we would meet again in such a situation. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. Who can predict what will happen in advance? I heard from Reverend Jin Yang that you like to drink tea. This cup of tea was specially prepared for you. Please try it." Xiao Bieli pushed one of the cups over. Ning-chen took a sip and calmly said, "The quality of the tea isn't bad. Unfortunately, the heavens didn't specially invite me to drink it. This tea is tasteless." Xiao Bieli smiled. "The Grand Xia's Jiming Marquis not only has a killing sword, but also a mouth sharper than a sword. I'm fully worthy of such praise." Ning-chen put down his cup without the slightest modesty. "Knowledge Marquis, practically everyone in the world knows that you were forced into the ocean of Devil Wheel. I'm very curious. With the enmity between you and the various sects of the Central Prefecture, why did you choose to help them?" asked Xiao Libi. "The Pill Tower and the Heavenly Sanctum's sacred lands also have enmity with each other. But aren't they following the heavens to conquer the 5 regions? I presume you know the reason even without me saying it," said Ning-chen. "It's different?" Xiao Bieli shook his head. "We're doing it for survival while you're repaying evil with good. Jiming Marquis, if you promise not to interfere in the war between the 2 realms, I can also promise you that I won't let the flames of war spread to the eastern divine plains." Ning-chen narrowed his eyes. That promise from the heavens is truly a great temptation. It's just a win-win deal. Jiming Marquis, there's no need for you to take such risks for people who have nothing to do with you or even have enmity with you. You shouldn't care who's in charge of the world, right? Said Xiao Bieli. "Ning-chen, you can't be tricked by this scoundrel." Hastily reminded him when she saw that a certain person was about to switch sides. "Don't be rude. Also, call me Big Brother Ning," said Ning-chen softly. "Who is this?" asked Xiao Bieli curiously. "The descendant of a senior. I've come out to broaden my horizons." "It's fine as long as she doesn't exist," said Ning-chen. "Your talent isn't bad." Xiao Bieli waved his hand. took out a sheepskin scroll, and handed it over. This is a secret art of the Tianxiang dynasty, the heavenly sword transformation. Since it's our first meeting, consider it a greeting gift from me to this junior. Ningchen smiled and said, why aren't you thanking Senior Tianxiang for bestowing martial arts upon you? Took a step forward and received the scroll. She obediently bowed. Many thanks, Senior Tianxiang. Xiao Bieli nodded and then looked back at the young man. Marquis, what do you think of my suggestion? Compared to the Central Plains sects, the Heavenly Sanctum doesn't have much enmity with you. It shouldn't be difficult to choose who you can trust more. I will seriously consider your suggestion. However, there's something I've been unable to figure out. I hope you can explain it to me, said Ningchen. Please speak, said Xiao Bieli. I once stayed on the Heavenly Sanctum planet for a period of time, so I have some understanding of the Heavenly Sanctum. With the Heavenly Sanctum's resources, it's more than enough to satisfy the various sections. Why must you pay such a huge price to invade the 5 regions? Asked Ningchen seriously. Xiao Bieli fell silent. A moment later he sighed. This matter involves the Heavenly Sanctum's secrets. Forgive me for not being able to tell you. All I can say is that this war is extremely important to the Heavenly Sanctum. We can't back down. Ningchen's eyes lit up. If the 2 realms stop fighting, what are the Heavenly Sanctum's conditions? The inner realm will completely give up the central region, replied Xiao Bieli. There's no room for discussion? Asked Ningchen. There's no room for discussion, said Xiao Bieli calmly. I'll tell the Alliance sovereigns about this condition when I return. However, the Central Plains sect's foundations are here. It'll be difficult to make them give up. Ningchen shook his head regretfully. If they don't give up, then I'll beat them until they give up. Marquis, you're a smart person, the smartest person in the world. I hope your decision won't disappoint me. A red figure appeared behind Xiao Bieli. It was a familiar face and a powerful aura. It was no weaker than a human sovereign. A moment later, the red figure faded and vanished. Ningchen narrowed his eyes, but they returned to normal in the blink of an eye. He slowly said, as expected, you're not a mortal. I never thought that the Vermilion Bird Divine Treasury would be found by you in the end. It was just a pleasant surprise. Marquis, the reason I revealed so many secrets to you was because I didn't want to see 2 identical Marquises one day replace the other, said Xiao Bieli indifferently. Don't worry, Jiming. That day won't come. The corners of Ningchen's mouth curled up as he smiled. Chapter 563. At the front of the 2 armies, Destiny Knowing and Heaven Minister finished their discussion. The armies retreated, and neither of them took the opportunity to attack. The 2 of them had a tacit understanding. Once the armies left, they both turned and left. The 2 of them stood with their backs facing each other, each with their own thoughts. The confrontation between the 5 regions and the Heavenly Sanctum had begun over a cup of tea. Heaven Minister, why didn't you kill him? Asked Fan Xinghong. She had been waiting for a long time. I'm not confident. Furthermore, I cherish talent. I don't want to become enemies with him, said Xiao Bieli softly. Will he really agree to Heaven Minister's conditions and not interfere in the war between the 2 realms? Asked Fan Xinghong. I don't know. Perhaps he won't, replied Xiao Bieli. Hearing this, Fan Xinghong frowned and said, since even the celestial phenomenon is not confident, why don't you let me kill him and get rid of future troubles? There's no need. Xiao Bieli shook his head. You can't kill him. At least you can't right now. If he doesn't let go in 3 days, I'll give you a chance to kill him. On the other side, red clothes fluttered in the wind as the 2 of them traveled north together. Big Brother Ning, are you really going to agree to that bastard's conditions? Pouted unhappily. Why not? Asked Ningchen. You're someone from the 5 regions. How can you compromise with the outer realms? Asked Do you think I care about such things? Smiled Ningchen. You can't agree to it. Otherwise, once the Central Plains falls, I'll have no home to return to. Tried to persuade him once more. The eastern region is vast enough to accommodate a new sword-forging mountain manor. Ningchen smiled. I don't want to go to the eastern region. Big Brother Ning, don't give up on the Central Plains, said It's not up to me to decide whether to give up or not. I promised your grandpa the sword master that I would give the Central Plains sex a chance. However, if they don't want this chance, I won't force them, said Ningchen calmly. In the Jingfeng city in the north of Zhongzhou state, in the main hall where all the venerables were having a discussion, a secret report had recorded the details of the meeting between Knowing Destiny and Tianxiang. When Zhao Liusu saw it, she frowned slightly. Alliance Senior, what happened? Below the seats, two new faces sat quietly. One of them opened his mouth and asked. Zhao Liusu came back to her senses and smiled faintly. It's nothing. The spies have reported that the negotiations between the military advisor and the celestial minister have ended. They should be back soon. Great Xia's Jiming Marquis, I've been looking forward to it for a long time, said Zun Wenyang of Nanling. South of competitive Peak City, 400 miles away, a red coat was heading north. At the same time, a green coat was heading east. As they passed each other, Ning Chen stopped in his tracks. It was at this point that Green Robe turned, smiled, and mercilessly unleashed a palm strike. Ning Chen grabbed In. His figure was like an illusion as he quickly retreated dozens of feet. However, the green-clothed woman was unwilling to let him go. Her delicate hand was like the sickle of the Grim Reaper, threatening to take his life. Ning Chen took a strange step, and the water light flickered. He avoided the woman's palm power, unwilling to take it head-on. Great Xia Jiming Marquis, where is your sword? The green-clothed woman smiled. She took a step forward and pointed. The sand around her gathered into a sword that tore through the air. Ning Chen frowned slightly. He flipped his palm and sent out of the battle. Then he waved his hand, and the clear sunly fire appeared. The white fan moved the wind and clouds, blocking the sand swords. Why aren't you fighting back? Are you unwilling or unable? Seeing that the opponent was only dodging and not attacking, the green-clothed woman's attacks became even fiercer. Shi Piaoshu, this is the first time we meet, yet you want to use martial arts to force me. This greeting gift is really hard to accept, Ning Chen's figure flashed, and he once again avoided the former's palm power. Jiming Marquis is indeed smart, but just being smart isn't enough to keep you alive. With her identity exposed, Shi Piaoshu's attacks did not stop at all. She flipped her palm, and the dust in the surroundings surged like a tide, sweeping thousands of feet. Her shocking power and killing intent were not hidden at all. A cold light flashed through Ning Chen's eyes. He stepped forward, and his white fan became a sword. Sword chi gathered in the surroundings, and he once again formed a peak sword. At this moment, a silver spear tore through the air and crashed toward the woman in the battle. When Shi Piaoshu saw this, she changed the direction of her palm and knocked away the silver spear. Junior apprentice sister, you actually attacked your senior apprentice sister for an outsider. How naughty, smiled Shi Piaoshu. As soon as she finished speaking, Bai Lingling appeared. Looking at the battle, her gentle expression hardened, and she softly reprimanded, Piaoshu, don't cause trouble. Qing Ning walked in front of the silver spear and put it away. She looked back and said coldly, Third senior apprentice sister, I don't care if you did it intentionally or not. In this world, anyone who dares to harm him will be my enemy. It's the same for everyone. Ning Chen's figure descended from the sky. Looking at the two chosen who had also come from the western Jade Mountain, his eyes constantly flashed. A sect with two sovereigns, plus Bai Lingling who wasn't a chosen but was even stronger than a chosen. The western Jade Mountain's foundation was truly shocking. When he had time, he wanted to see just what kind of person this western Jade Mountain master was. She was actually able to raise so many monstrous disciples. Is the fight over? Seeing that there was no movement, ran over and asked. It's over. Let's go back. Ning Chen smiled as he spoke. Soon after, he strode forward. Qing Ning followed by Bai Lingling and Shi Piaoshu. They all had different expressions and thoughts. Piaoshu, you should know that the Jiming Marquis is junior apprentice sister's reverse scale. Don't make such a joke in the future, said Bai Lingling seriously. Who says I'm joking? This time, junior apprentice sister just happened to stop me, smiled Shi Piaoshu. Hearing this, Bai Lingling frowned. Why? With junior apprentice sister's talent, If she doesn't sever her ties with the mortal world, she won't be able to enter the chosen realm in this lifetime. Apart from completing Master's task, my main goal was to kill this Jiming Marquis, said Shi Piaoshu indifferently. If you do this, Qin Ning will hate you for the rest of her life, said Bai Lingling. Hate, love, hatred. Human emotions will fade with time. Being a chosen has been a chosen for 800 years. Junior apprentice sister has plenty of time to forget these things. Moreover, Shi Piaoshu suddenly changed the topic. She looked at the red-clothed figure and smiled. In the short exchange just now, I discovered that this Jiming Marquis seemed to be doing his best to avoid using his cultivation. There must be a reason for this. I think that the Jiming Marquis's current body can't easily use martial arts. Bai Lingling was silent. After a moment, she sighed. Piaoshu, don't be rash. Not to mention the Jiming Marquis's position in Junior Apprentice Sister's heart, this is a critical moment in the battle between the two realms. If the 5 regions lose a military advisor who can contend against the Heavenly Minister, the situation will immediately become unfavorable for the inner realm. It's not the inner realm, but the central region. Although Heaven's sanctum is strong, without a chosen above chosen, it's more than enough to conquer the central region. It'll be difficult to conquer the entire 5 regions, said Shi Piaoshu. As the two talked, the group returned to competitive Peak City. Ningchen entered the meeting hall. Everyone stood up and respectfully welcomed him. Military advisor, how did the meeting go? Asked Zhao Liusu. Ningchen walked to his seat and sat down. He looked at the 8 supremes and the 2 unfamiliar supremes and smiled. These 2 should be supremes Wenyang and Xinling, right? Wenyang. Xinling. Greetings, military advisor. The 2 of them took half a step forward and politely bowed. No need for formalities. Please sit, said Ningchen. Thank you, military advisor. The 2 of them bowed once more before returning to their seats. The Heavenly Minister's condition for stopping the war is for the 5 regions to completely give up the central region. You can all think about it, said Ningchen. Impossible. Supremacy Li suddenly sat up and directly rejected it. His sudden figure seemed very lonely in the hall. Xianzhen, Yuxing, Qin Yu, and the other supremes from the other 3 regions chose to remain silent. A strange atmosphere rose in the hall, making it indescribably oppressive. Seeing that they didn't say anything, Supremacy Li's expression sank. Fellow Supremes, you should all understand that if the central region is lost so easily, the Heavenly Sanctum's ambition will grow infinitely. None of you want to see the flames of war spread to your own regions, right? Supremacy Li is right. Those who aren't of our race are bound to have different intentions. The Heavenly Sanctum paid such a huge price to break open the Netherworld King's barrier, so how could they give up so easily? This condition is just to divide the 5 regions. Zhao Liusu said solemnly. The Supremes fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Right, there's one more thing. Perhaps it can only be considered a private matter. The Heavenly Minister promised that as long as Grand Destiny withdrew from the war between the 2 realms, he would guarantee that the eastern region wouldn't be affected by the flames of war. Such a tempting condition, I can't even think of an excuse to refuse, said Ningchen. When Zhao Liusu and the other Supremes heard this, their expressions changed. What a Heavenly Minister! This was a plot to sow discord. He didn't even try to hide it. Military advisor, with your intelligence, there's no way you can't see that this is just a plot by the Heavenly Minister to sow discord. Don't fall for it, said Supremacy Li uneasily. Sow discord? Ningchen smiled. I know, but aren't you all tempted as well? Perhaps the Heavenly Sanctum will be satisfied if they take over the Central Plains. Of course, even if they aren't satisfied, there's still the Northern Plains, Western Earth, and Nanling. The Heavenly Sanctum's current strength isn't enough to take over the 5 regions. With this promise, the Eastern region will definitely be the safest region. The Central Plains won't be lost. We'll do our best to help the Central Plains stop the Heavenly Sanctum. Please don't give up on this world, said Supremacy Xan Ling and Supremacy Wenyang. In the next moment, Supremes Xianzhen, Yuxing, and Qin Yu also stood up and respectfully asked for orders. The 10 Supremes all bowed. The hall was abnormally quiet. Zhao Liusu also stood up and bowed silently. Outside the hall, Shi Piaoshu walked in and smiled. The Grand Xia's Grand Destiny Marquis truly lived up to his name. The heavenly minister's plan to sow discord seemed to have backfired. This battle of the wise was truly marvelous to the extreme. Piaoshu, the knowing Destiny Marquis can't die, said Bai Lingling seriously. The heavenly minister was too powerful. With just a few words, he had caused the already unstable alliance of the 5 regions to almost completely collapse. One had to admit that in this world, in addition to absolute strength, absolute wisdom also had an important position. Chapter 564. In competitive Peak City, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. In front of Wenshen Palace, Hong Yi stood quietly with thoughts flashing through his eyes. From today's battle with Shi Piaoshu, the demonic calamity's influence on him was more serious than he had imagined. His unstable cultivation body would bring him unpredictable danger at any time. Demon, Ning Chen murmured softly. In this world, other than him, there was only one true demon. Thinking of this, Ning Chen turned and walked into the hall, heading directly to Yin Er's room. The little girl was hugging a big pillow and sleeping soundly. She did not look like she was outside at all. Wake up. Ning Chen shook the little girl and called out. Sleepy. Yin Er snorted unhappily. Her eyes were wide open as she pushed the person in front of her away with a frown. She turned around and continued sleeping. I want to go out. Come with me. Ning Chen continued calling out. Yin Er pulled up the blanket and covered her head. She wrapped herself up and said in a daze. Be good. Sleep on the way. Ning Chen pulled open the blanket and pulled the little girl out from under it, and said softly, Didn't you just come back? Why are you going out again? The half-asleep Yin Er frowned and tried to burrow into the blanket, resisting with all her might. Something came up. Let's go. Ning Chen carried the little girl up forcefully and took the clothes at the side. He helped her put them on as he spoke. Can't you go by yourself? Yin Er wrapped herself around the former like an octopus. After saying that, she fell asleep again. Ning Chen struggled to put on the clothes and shoes for her. Just as he put her down, the little girl climbed onto the bed and slept soundly without a care for her image. Women are all the same trouble. Ning Chen picked up the little girl and carried her on his back. Then he strode out of the hall. If not for the fact that he was worried that the bald donkey would sense the lack of human aura on him, he really wanted to throw the little girl out of the window. Outside Swallow Cloud Mountain, Golden Buddha Ancient Temple, under the demon-subduing pagoda, Bodhi sat upright. Swastikas circled around his body, healing the injuries from the previous battle. In the golden light, traces of black demonic chi lingered and clashed with the Buddhist power, causing the Buddha's indestructible golden body to have an irreparable flaw. He used to be the head of the West Earth's Buddhist sect's 3 venerables. Now, he had fallen to a state where it was hard to distinguish between a human and a ghost. Who could say for sure who was at fault? Buddhists were selfless. They were dedicated to all living beings in the world, slaying demons and suppressing demons. They had never had any utilitarian or selfish motives. The Buddha's path was getting harder and harder to traverse day by day. Gradually, he lost track of where he was. Outside the Golden Buddha Temple, a beautiful figure dressed in blue and white stood quietly. It was the demon venerable Bai Yunlian. He had been waiting for many days to avenge Yao Qilua. At this moment, Red Shirt appeared with the sleeping girl on his back. He stepped onto the stone steps in front of the temple and walked into the temple. As they passed each other, Ning Chen stopped and looked at the woman beside him. Still waiting, he asked calmly. Yes. Bai Yunlian nodded. The current you can't kill him. Ning Chen spoke the truth. Supreme Bodhi was already at the peak of the human sovereign realm. Even though his cultivation had declined after he demonized and the Buddha and demon clashed, he was still not someone that ordinary sovereigns could compare to. Bai Yunlian was silent. After a moment, he asked, Can you help me? Ning Chen shook his head. The current me can't help you. I'll give you another piece of advice. Revenge isn't urgent. Even if he was injured by the Sword Sovereign, as long as he's still in the Golden Buddha Temple, no one can kill him. The demon-subduing pagoda was extremely helpful to Supreme Bodhi's cultivation. Unless the demon-subduing pagoda was destroyed, the Golden Buddha Temple would be a forbidden land for demons and demons. Then why have you come here? Bai Yunlian was confused. You said before that you worked together with a demon to deal with Supreme Bodhi. I want to know where that person is. Back then, Xia Zi had been heavily injured and had been rescued by 2 women. White Flood Dragon had just entered the human realm, so he wasn't familiar with the experts of the human realm. However, Supreme Bodhi definitely knew. Xia Zi had walked the path of demonization much longer than him. Perhaps he could get some inspiration from him. That person was struck by Supreme Bodhi's palm. He might not survive, said Bai Yunlian softly. Whether he's dead or alive, we'll only know after we see him. I'll go in first, said Ning Chen. If it's not convenient, can stay here with me for now. Bai Yunlian glanced at the little girl on Ning Chen's back. No need. Ning Chen shook his head as he spoke, and then he flipped his palm and blasted open the door to the temple before striding in. Ning Chen walked over to the demon-subduing pagoda. Looking at the golden pagoda, he narrowed his eyes. When he saw this pagoda, he thought of the phoenix body's indestructible turtle shell. If he wanted to destroy this pagoda, it wouldn't be easy. Amitabha. Benefactor, it's already too late today. Please come back tomorrow. A little monk continuously went up to stop him. Ning Chen waved his hand and a jade talisman appeared in his hand. He handed it to the little monk and calmly said, "Send this talisman into the pagoda." The little monk was puzzled. But when he sensed the powerful pressure coming from the talisman, he understood that he couldn't handle this matter. He took the jade talisman and quickly walked into the pagoda. Within the demon-subduing pagoda, Subhuti was still suppressing his injuries when he sensed someone enter. He opened his eyes and looked at the little monk. He calmly asked, "What is it?" Reporting to the Venerable, someone outside sent a disciple to deliver this talisman. The little monk respectfully handed over the jade talisman. Subhuti's eyes lit up. This was the Alliance's commander's seal. "What does the person who sent you look like?" asked Subhuti. "It's a red-robed youth. He's carrying a sleeping girl on his back. Other than that, there's nothing special about him," replied the little monk. "A red-robed youth?" Subhuti softly muttered. He now had a better understanding of this person's identity. There could only be one red-robed youth who possessed this talisman, the Grand Xia's wisdom Marquis. Thinking of this, Subhuti stood up and walked outside. Ning Chen calmly waited outside the demon-subduing pagoda. When he saw the Buddha walk out, he smiled. "Subhuti, long time no see. How have you been?" "Wisdom Marquis, are you here for revenge?" Subhuti waved his hand and returned the jade talisman. "Wrong. I'm here as the military advisor of the 5 Territory Alliance. I want to ask you something," replied Ning Chen as he received the jade talisman. Subhuti's expression didn't change. He calmly asked, "What is it?" "Xia Zi's whereabouts and the identity of the person who saved him." "Don't tell me you don't know?" asked Ning Chen indifferently. Subhuti was silent for a moment. After a while, he said, "At that time, there were 2 people who appeared. I don't know who one of them was. As for the other person, she was far away from the battle and didn't directly attack. However, from her aura, I can vaguely guess that she's very likely Luo Shenmi Fei." "Oh, it's her?" Ning Chen was startled. It was that mysterious woman again. "What's the background of this person?" Ning Chen recovered from his shock and spoke with a serious expression. "Luo Shui God," replied Subhuti truthfully. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. God? These 2 words weren't commonly used in the human world. Like the 4 symbols gods, they were strange existences that coexisted with heaven and earth. Of course, without any embellishments, only the 2 words God referred to the existence that surpassed everything, the king of hell, the 7 extremes. Who would have thought that Luo Shenmi wasn't human? No wonder this woman was able to understand the law of words, even though she was only in the half-reverend realm. Chapter 565. Outside the Golden Buddha Temple, Ning Chen walked out after receiving his answer. He glanced at the woman in front of the temple and said, "Miss Bai, we'll meet again someday." Bai Yunlian nodded silently. Ning Chen didn't say anything else and headed south. After a few breaths, he disappeared into the night. On the banks of the Luo River, a beautiful woman was playing the zither. Her aura was as calm as water, without the slightest sharpness of a martial artist. At this moment, there was the sound of footsteps. The wind whistled and a red figure slowly walked over. When she looked back, she was already 300 meters away. The secret realm's restrictions automatically activated, blocking the person's path. However, the flowing clouds turned into a sword and cut open a path to welcome the arrival of the knowing destiny cultivator. Ding! The sound of the zither echoed across the river. A waterfall of water turned into a sword and flew out, blocking the intruder. Ning Chen's expression didn't change. Wind and clouds gathered around him, turning into a stream of swords that blocked the water sword. Luotian's hands moved and the scattered water sword changed again, condensing into one and slashing towards the intruder. In terms of martial arts, you're unfathomable. In terms of the sword, you're still a bit inferior. Ning Chen said calmly. Then he condensed his yuan qi with his fingers and slashed out with his sword, shattering the water sword that was approaching him with a clang. Knowing destiny Marquis, I apologize for trespassing on the Luo River. Luotian pressed her hands down, stopping the zither music. We're mortal enemies. What's there to be polite about? Ning Chen calmly said. So the knowing destiny Marquis is here to take revenge? Unfortunately, you're alone. It'll be difficult, said Luotian indifferently. Is that so? Ning Chen's eyes turned cold, and a demonic aura filled his eyes as he spoke. Noisy. Just as the atmosphere became tense, an unhappy murmur sounded. Yin Yu, who was sleeping soundly on Ning Chen's back, was disturbed by the confrontation between the two. She closed her eyes and reached out to push Ning Chen away before continuing to sleep. In an instant, Ning Chen regained his composure and suppressed his demonic instincts. A smile reappeared on his face and he said, Miss Mi Fei, you've misunderstood. There's no need to mention past grudges. I didn't come here for revenge, but to inquire about a person. Who is it? Asked Luotian. Xiazi, the demon that Miss once saved, said Ning Chen. When Luotian heard this, she waved her hand and sent a letter over. She said, Xiazi has been taken away by Lufei. This is the letter she left for you. Ning Chen took the letter, opened it and glanced at it. His eyes narrowed slightly. It turned out that Lufei had already guessed that he wouldn't be able to escape the demonic tribulation, so she had deliberately left him this letter. Many thanks. After saying this, Ning Chen turned around and left. Hold on. Luotian stood up and said. Ning Chen stopped and turned around, waiting for the former to speak. The corners of Luotian's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. She said, Is it very difficult to suppress the demonic nature? In the Luo Shui realm, I look forward to the Jiming Marquis return. When Ning Chen heard this, the coldness in his eyes intensified. In the blink of an eye, he turned around and left. Judging the situation, you've improved. Luotian smiled and said softly. Although she didn't know why the devil body of the knowing destiny state would stay in the human world, she had to admit that this arrangement was really unexpected. Presumably, the various sects in the world were still in the dark. The scarlet devil that they had always feared had become the military advisor that they relied on the most. Outside the Luo Shui realm, Ning Chen turned around and his eyes flashed. The Luo Shui god lived up to his name. To a certain extent, he was even scarier than the sovereign of the human world. In competitive Peak City, when the sun rose from the east, Jiming returned and threw Yin, who hadn't woken up, back onto the bed. Then, he took out the letter that Luofei had left for him and read it carefully. Jiming, when I saw the letter, I had already left with Z. Z is fine, there's no need to worry. You're different from Z. Z is too kind and entered the seamless realm, unable to escape. Relatively speaking, your understanding of the human heart is better than anyone else in the world. No matter what, you can maintain the greatest rationality. However, the sin of killing millions is not something that can be resisted by humans. Sooner or later, you will also have to face the punishment of the demonic tribulation. When Z entered the demonic path, I checked the Eternal Night scripture. Unfortunately, I only found a few bits of information. I hope it will be of help to you. Demons and demonic tribulations are not the same. Demons themselves do not have demonic tribulations. The reason why demonic tribulations exist is because of the conflict between human nature and demonic nature. Only by proving one's heart can one reach perfection. However, proving one's heart does not necessarily mean one's human nature. It is more likely that the demonic nature will completely devour one's human nature. Z has reached the critical moment of proving his heart. I took him away because I did not want him to be disturbed by the human heart of this world. As for whether I can help him find his original heart, I am not sure. Remember, one day when you also face this day, it is important to find your human nature. However, if the world does not give Jiming a chance to find his human nature, then completely enter the demonic path. You have done enough for the human world, there is no need to force yourself. I hope we can meet again. Take care. There were not many words, not even a page of ink, but it was the deepest care of a friend who had gone through life and death together. Perhaps, only those who truly cared about you would not care whether you were a human or a demon when you met again. After Ning Chen finished reading the letter, demonic fire rose from his hand and burned the letter completely, leaving no trace behind. Outside the military advisory hall, a guard quickly stepped forward and knelt down. "What is it?" asked Ning Chen calmly. "The Heavenly Palace's army has mobilized human sovereigns. The front lines are in an emergency. The Alliance sovereign has asked you to go over and discuss it," said the guard respectfully. "Oh." When Ning Chen heard this, a wisp of surprise flashed in his eyes. "So fast? You can leave first?" After dismissing the guard, Ning Chen walked toward the conference hall. The 10 human sovereigns were sitting in the Hall of the Sovereigns with serious expressions. Clearly, the emergency at the front lines made them feel pressured. When Ning Chen walked in, the 10 human sovereigns stood up and respectfully welcomed him. "What happened?" asked Ning Chen, who was now the military advisor. "I don't know." Heaven's Sanctum suddenly launched an attack and sent out 5 human supremes to participate in the battle. Mu Hua, Qi Wei, and Bai Li all suffered different degrees of injuries. The Allied forces also suffered heavy losses. They lost 4 cities in a single day, Zhao Liusu said in a low voice. Ning Chen frowned slightly. It was not normal for the Heavenly Palace to use their human sovereigns before the inner realm. From the start of the war until now, apart from the first battle, neither side had used their human sovereigns. It wasn't that they couldn't, but that they didn't want to. This was a tacit understanding of war. The destructive power of human sovereigns was too shocking. Unless it was a decisive battle or as a last resort, no one was willing to use it. "Are there any important resources near the 4 cities that were seized?" asked Ning Chen after thinking for a moment. "Oh." Zhao Liusu shook her head. "Strange." Ning Chen got up and walked over to the map. He looked at it for a long time, but he still didn't see anything important about the 4 cities. If it wasn't for the resources or important checkpoints, then what was the Heavenly Palace's goal? Seeing the military advisor pondering, the 10 human sovereigns also remained silent. The Grand Xia's Jiming Marquis was more experienced than anyone else. This was what they lacked. Alliance Sovereign, immediately send people to help the 3 human sovereigns. Mu Hua and the others are in danger. After a long time, Ning Chen's eyes sank. When the 10 human sovereigns heard Zhao Liusu's words, they were all startled. They didn't understand. Perhaps defeating a human sovereign was possible, but killing a sovereign was not as simple as they thought. If a sovereign wanted to leave, even if there were 2 experts on the same level blocking them, it wouldn't be that easy. Unless the opponent was a supreme expert like the Sword Sovereign, only then would it be possible to kill a sovereign in a one-on-one battle. Everyone, I'm not joking with you. The decisive battle is about to begin. If you don't want anything to happen to the 3 sovereigns, immediately go and help them, said Ning Chen when he saw the other sovereigns looking at each other. This time's war would be different from the past. That celestial minister didn't even think about taking over the Central Plains step by step. Instead, he was preparing for the decisive battle right after he finished mobilizing his troops. Of course, this method had greater risks, but if the Heavenly Palace wasn't prepared enough, it was also a rare opportunity. It had to be said that Celestial Minister was truly daring to enter the decisive battle as soon as the war began. However, from another point of view, this also exposed a problem with the Heavenly Palace. They lacked time, a great lack of time. Gambling would always be a taboo for a commander. It was impossible for Celestial Minister to not know this, even if it might catch the Heavenly Palace by surprise. Report. Just at this moment, the battle report came from outside the palace. Come in, said Zhao Liusu. The guard ran in, reported the battle, and then quickly retreated. Zhao Liusu opened the report, and her expression changed. Alliance Sovereign, what happened? Asked Xianzhen Sovereign. Battle report from the front lines. Half a day ago, the Heavenly Palace's army attacked again. An unknown expert attacked and killed Mu Huazuan in less than 30 moves, said Zhao Liusu. When the 10 sovereigns heard this, their expressions sank. How was that possible? Was it the Sword Sovereign? Asked Xianzhen Sovereign. In the entire Heavenly Palace, the only person who could kill a sovereign in less than 30 moves was the Sword Sovereign. Oh. Zhao Liusu shook her head. The report specifically mentioned that this person wasn't the Sword Sovereign. When the sovereigns heard this, their expressions became extremely ugly. Just the Sword Sovereign was enough to make them extremely wary. Now, there was another expert who wasn't any weaker than the Sword Sovereign. Did the heavens really want to destroy the Central Plains? Military advisor. Zhao Liusu looked at Ningqian. What should we do now? Xianzhen Sovereign, immediately send someone to Luo Redivine City to inform Alcade King about this matter. Tell him to be more careful. Sovereign Wenyang, you're responsible for calling back all the sovereigns except for Sovereign Hong Lu, who is taking care of the refugees outside. As for Sovereign Bailey and Sovereign Qi Wei, there's no need to send anyone to support them. It's too late. They'll definitely know about Mu Huazuan's death before we do. They'll know what to do. Also, Sovereign Li Shan, go and replace Mu Huazuan to stabilize the army's morale. From today onwards, the strategy will change. We don't have to care about the gains and losses of each city, even if it's a large city with war resources. If we can't defend it, destroy all the resources. Last but not least, and the most important thing, all the sovereigns should be on standby at all times. Yes. When the sovereigns heard this, they bowed respectfully. Chapter 566. In Eternal Heaven City, Tian Xiang stood still. Battle reports were constantly being sent back from the front lines. The war between the two realms had begun, and victory had to be decided in the shortest amount of time. At the same time, on the battlefield between the two realms, Tianfu's army was divided into 3 groups. Each group was led by 2 supremes, and they advanced towards the north with all their might. Their fierce attacks forced the allied forces to retreat again and again. The price of not being able to destroy the Heavens Manor army that day was now clear. The Heavens Manor army had left their home, and their numbers were no less than the Central Plains army. Adding on the advantage of sovereigns, the Alliance army was forced into a passive position. However, even with the advantage at the front lines, Xiao Bieli's face didn't reveal any joy. Tian Xiang, is there something wrong? Fan Xinghong looked at Tian Xiang in confusion. Xiao Bieli looked ahead and nodded. The battle seems to be in our favor, but it's not progressing as quickly as we imagined. The Alliance army of the Central Plains' main goal is to drag things out, and they rarely clash head-on. Although they've been defeated time and time again, they haven't been destroyed. They've only lost a few unimportant cities. Xinghong doesn't know much about war. If there's anything I can help with, please tell me, said Fan Xinghong. Xiao Bieli sighed. That Jiming Marquis did everything perfectly. If we had enough time, it would be a joyous thing to have such an opponent. However, the Heavens Manor doesn't have time, and we can't afford to drag things out. Tian Xiang, what do you mean? Asked Fan Xinghong. Kill the Jiming Marquis, said Xiao Bieli. Fan Xinghong's eyes narrowed. In the end, it still came to this? Your mission is to work together with the Vermilion Bird to eliminate the Jiming Marquis. I've already found a way to deal with it based on the way the Jiming Marquis fought with you in Nether City. When the time comes, the Vermilion Bird will cooperate with you and create an opportunity for you. Remember, The Jiming Marquis battle experience is incomparable to ordinary people, and he'll quickly adapt. If you can't kill him within 10 moves, immediately retreat, said Xiao Bieli. Yes, said Fan Xinghong respectfully. In the Hall of Venerables of competitive Peak City, Ningchen looked at the map of the army in the hall and inserted a bamboo stick into it from time to time. He was weighing the gains and losses of each city and the impact it would have on the Allied forces. Pingyu City, 10,000 reinforcements. After 10 days of delay, more than 2,000 have died. Retreat. Jinhui City, we have 10,000 reinforcements. We have stalled for 15 days, and 3,000 have died in battle. Retreat. Pingwan City, 20,000 reinforcements. Defend and fight to the death. Yes. One after another, orders were passed down from the Hall of Supremes. All the human Supremes looked solemn. They knew very well that the current battle situation was obviously unfavorable for the central region. However, the military advisor's arrangement had already preserved the combat power of the Allied forces to the greatest extent. No one could say anything about it. The fierce offensive of the Heaven's Mansion army had exceeded everyone's expectations. The battle had just begun and they had already entered the decisive stage. This was something that had never happened before. That celestial phenomenon had spared no expense in his fierce attacks, causing the Allied forces to feel the greatest pressure. Advisor, if this continues, the Heaven's Mansion army will attack the north sooner or later. Are we going to keep defending like this? Reverend Xianzhen stood up with a worried expression. In war, if you win, you have to defend. Right now, the Allied forces are just paying back their debts. Right now, the Heaven's Mansion army is basically on par with the central region. With the threat of that Peak Supremes, who knows when they will attack? Only by defending can we reduce our losses, replied Ning Chen as he looked at the map. Is this situation irreversible? Asked Reverend Wen Yang in a deep voice. Situation? When did I say that we're at a disadvantage? Said Ning Chen indifferently. Everyone was startled when they heard this. Anyone could see that the Allied forces were being pushed back again and again by the Heaven's Mansion army. Advisor, please tell us, said Zhao Liusu from the main seat. I've said it before. Gambling is always a taboo for a leader. If you win, you'll be caught off guard. If you lose, you'll suffer a crushing defeat. The chances of winning are 50-50. Alliance Master, if you were in my shoes, would you place your hopes on a single bet? Ningchen said calmly. I wouldn't. Zhao Liusu shook her head. She believed that neither the Inner Realm nor the Heaven's Mansion could afford to lose this war. This kind of gamble was too risky. You wouldn't, and the Minister of Heaven shouldn't do this, especially when they have the advantage in numbers. The only explanation for that Minister of Heaven making this choice is that the Heaven's Mansion needs time. Ning Chen's lips curled into a cold smile as he said, if the Heaven's Mansion army and the Allied forces continue fighting step by step, with the Minister of Heaven behind them, the chances of victory are only 50-50. However, in the current situation, the Heaven's Mansion army's chances of victory are less than 30%. Everyone looked at each other when they heard this, and the worry in their hearts was greatly relieved. Advisor, you mean that the Allied forces have the advantage right now? Asked Zhao Liusu softly. Not completely. We do have the advantage in the overall situation, but looking at the overall situation, we're still in an absolutely passive position, said Ning Chen honestly. Zhao Liusu frowned when she heard this. What do you mean? Simply put, although the Allied forces are losing again and again, this situation will slowly reverse soon. Of course, the precondition is that the Allied forces don't make any more intolerable mistakes, said Ning Chen. What about that expert comparable to the Sword Sovereign? Will he become a variable? Asked Zhao Liusu. Alliance Sovereign, what do you think is the reason for this situation? Without him, the Heaven's Mansion wouldn't even have the qualifications to gamble. The 30% chance of victory I mentioned is because of his existence. Otherwise, how could the Heaven's Mansion army have a 10% chance of victory? Said Ning Chen indifferently. When everyone heard this, a weird look flashed across their eyes. What an arrogant Jiming Marquis. Other than his ability to set up a trap, the arrogance in his words was very different from the martial Marquis of Desya. Report. At this moment, A voice rang out from outside the hall, drawing everyone's attention back. "Come in," said Zhao Liusu. "Alliance Sovereign, the Heavens Mansion has sent a letter of challenge," said the guard respectfully. Zhao Liusu took the letter, puzzled. Why would they send a letter of challenge at this time? Ningchen walked back from the map and calmly asked, "What is it?" "A letter of challenge from the Sword Sovereign of the Heavens Mansion," said Zhao Liusu gravely. "Oh." Ningchen took the letter and glanced at it. His eyes narrowed slightly. Could it be that they couldn't wait, or did they have other plans? "Send the letter of challenge to the Sunset Divine City." Ningchen waved his hand and sent the letter back. "Yes." The guard respectfully accepted the order and left the hall. "Alliance Sovereign Military Advisor, this battle is extremely likely to be targeted at the Alcade King. We have to be on guard," reminded Xianzhen solemnly. In the Alliance army, only the Alcade King had peak battle strength. But in the Heavens Mansion camp, apart from the Sword Sovereign, there was still an unknown expert. If they took advantage of this opportunity to attack, even the Alcade King wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. "I understand your worries, but this battle can't be avoided." Zhao Liusu sighed softly. The Sword Sovereign's letter of challenge couldn't be rejected by the Alcade King. This day had already arrived when the battle between the two realms had begun. "Military Advisor, do you have any ideas?" asked Zhao Liusu. "Send someone to invite the Tai Bai Prefecture Lord, Dean Bai Lu, and the Venerable Bodhi," said Ning Chen after thinking for a moment. "The Venerable Bodhi and the Tai Bai Prefecture Lord are both injured. I'm afraid they won't be able to stop that expert," said Zhao Liusu worriedly. "It's fine. Although the two of them are injured and aren't at their peak, they were once peak experts. They have experience fighting peak experts. With Dean Bai Lu's help, even if they can't stop him, they'll be able to delay him for a while. In addition, the Sword Sovereign and the Alcade King's battle will be held in the Windless Plains. It's about the same distance as Competitive City and Eternal City, so it's considered fair. However, you must pay attention to the sovereigns of the Heavens Mansion at all times. As for the people in Competitive City, it'll still be the Alliance Sovereign and Venerable Lishan. With the two of them, even if the Heavens Mansion attacks, they'll be able to hold on until the Sovereign's return," said Ning Chen. "Advisor, how about we use this chance to attack Eternal City?" suggested Venerable Lishan. "That's impossible. That celestial minister won't leave Eternal City so easily, especially at such a crucial time. Although he's only fought once, it's clear that his attainments in formations are extraordinary. In this battle, we're being tied down by too many sovereigns. It's hard for us to split our attention. It's almost impossible for us to attack Eternal City," said Ning Chen. "Advisor, have you ever thought about what would happen if that expert didn't interfere and the Alcade King lost in a fair battle?" asked Zhao Liusu. "I can only say that you'd best pray that such an outcome doesn't occur. Otherwise, the chances of the Heavens Mansion winning this battle will be over 70%. Even if the Central Plains is lucky enough to win, it'll be an extremely bitter victory," said Ning Chen calmly. Everyone fell silent. Without a doubt, that was an outcome they didn't want to see. A messenger appeared in Eternal City, delivering a letter. In front of the chessboard, Xiao Bieli stopped playing chess. Glancing at the reply from Peak Competition City, he destroyed the letter and continued playing chess. On the chessboard, black pieces and white pieces crisscrossed. It was impossible to see who had the advantage. However, there was killing intent everywhere. With each step, people could deeply sense the difficulty of placing a piece. "Celestial Minister," Mu Chang'e appeared and bowed. "Sword Sovereign, remember, you can only win this battle. You can't lose." Xiao Libi said the last word. "Understood." Mu Chang'e nodded. On the chessboard, a large dragon was formed. The finishing piece was the finishing piece. In the end, the deciding factor of victory or defeat was still absolute martial strength. Even the wisest person would make a mistake. Even the wisest person wouldn't be able to plan every step of the way. The existence of absolute martial strength could simplify the battle to the greatest extent, making up for the inadequacies of scheming. The wisest person helped the situation. The wisest person helped the situation. The celestial minister was the true decision-maker of the Heavens Mansion. For the sake of the general situation, he would create a killing trap. Chapter 567. In Sunset Divine City, the sword god was nurturing his sword. His battle intent had reached the peak of his life. This battle might be the last battle of his life, and he didn't want to have any regrets. Senior Alcade. Hong Yi appeared in the city and bowed respectfully. Ning Chen, no matter what the result of tomorrow's battle is, don't let anyone interfere, said the Alcade King. Ning Chen frowned and said, Senior, how confident are you in winning this battle? 40%. After wasting 100 years, his sword wasn't as sharp as it had been 100 years ago. Compared to him, the Heavenly Mansion Sword Sovereign was at his peak. His chances of victory were less than 50%. I need a victory. Or perhaps the Central Plains sects need a victory. Senior Alcade, you can't lose this battle, said Ning Chen. I will do my best, said the Alcade King. The Heavenly Mansion's Fan Xinghong requests an audience with the Central Plains Sword God. At this moment, a cold voice rang out from outside Sunset Divine City, interrupting their conversation. Come in, said the Alcade King. Many thanks. As he spoke, a stream of light flashed past and a black-clothed young girl arrived. In the blink of an eye, she was already in their line of sight. May I ask why you've come? Asked the Alcade King. I'm here on behalf of the Heavenly Minister to gift you a sword. Fan Xinghong pulled out the silk in her hand, causing an ancient sword that glowed with piercingly cold light to fly out and descend onto the Divine Tao altar with a clang. This is the Separation Sword. It's the only divine weapon in the Heavenly Mansion that can rival the Heavenly Tower. The sword's sovereign wanted a fair battle, so he asked the Heavenly Minister to give it to you, said Fan Xinghong softly. The Alcade King looked at the sword in front of him and didn't refuse. He calmly said, When you return, please thank the Heavenly Minister and the Sword Sovereign for me. I accept this sword. My realm has already shown enough sincerity. I hope your realm can follow the agreement and treat this battle fairly, said Fan Xinghong seriously. Don't worry. I've already warned that no one is allowed to interfere, said the Alcade King. There's no need to doubt the Alcade King's reputation. However, at this point, Fan Xinghong changed the topic. She looked at the red-clothed young man and sneered. It's hard to believe the credibility of some people. When Ning Chen heard this, the corners of his mouth curled up as he said, Miss Fan, when you say someone, are you referring to me? Mr. Bai, or should I say, Marquis Jiming, do you think your reputation is trustworthy? Fan Xinghong asked indifferently. Hey, Miss Fan, you must have misunderstood me. Knowing Destiny has always been a man of his word. Everyone in the world knows that. Ning Chen smiled. Master Bai, the thickness of your skin is even more impressive than your swordsmanship, mocked Fan Xinghong. You're overpraising me, Ning Chen said indifferently. Fan Xinghong snorted coldly. She looked at the man on the divine altar and said, Alcade King, I'm sure you don't want this battle to be ruined by someone's scheme. I have a suggestion that I hope you'll consider. Please speak, the Alcade King said. From now until the end of the battle tomorrow, I'll follow the Jiming Marquis and prevent anyone from using schemes to ruin this fair battle. The Alcade King looked at the red-clothed young man and said, Ning Chen, you can decide this yourself. Fan Xinghong also looked at him and said indifferently, Jiming Marquis, if you don't have any ulterior motives, you shouldn't have any reason to refuse this suggestion. My strength is far inferior to yours, so I can't pose any threat to you. After tomorrow's battle, I will naturally leave. Of course, you can also refuse, but your existence is the variable that my realm is most worried about. If your realm can't guarantee that tomorrow's battle will be fair, then my realm won't make any more promises. Ning Chen glanced at the Alcade King on the god's altar. A moment later, his gaze shifted to the black-clothed young girl beside him. He smiled faintly and said, Lady Fan is truly eloquent. I have no objections to your conditions, but I'm afraid you'll be wronged. It's just one day. I can still endure such a small grievance, said Fan Xinghong coldly. Then I'll have to ask Miss Fan to leave with me. Ning Chen smiled. Soon after, he bowed towards Alcade King on the divine altar and said, Alcade King, this junior will take his leave first. The Alcade King nodded. Ningchen turned and a cold light flashed through his eyes. He didn't stay any longer and directly walked away. The two of them left. The Alcade King sighed softly and closed his eyes once more, preparing for battle. The sun rose and set. Night and day flew by. The day of the battle was approaching. Both realms were nervous. On the windless plains, the black-clothed man stood still. A sword stood in the sand. His divine weapon, Heavenly Tower, hadn't been unsheathed, but its sword pressure swept out in all directions. Footsteps rang out from the north. White robes fluttered in the wind and sword intent spread. The Central Plains sword god of 100 years had come. There was only one sword in the world. Kings would never meet another king. Today, the peak had appeared together. Heaven and earth mourned. Mu Chang'e. Jiaoguang. Please. Without any greetings, the Heavenly Tower and Separation Sword were unsheathed at the same time. In an instant, the windless plains was filled with wind and sand. Sword 2 Jadefall. Mu Chang'e was the first to attack. An aura of death spread out from the Heavenly Tower. With a slash of his sword, the void for 5 miles shattered. The Alcade King didn't dodge. He blocked the Jadefall. With a loud bang, sword chi scattered everywhere. Both sides were as still as mountains. Only the dust and sand were sent flying, indicating that this battle was different from the past. Using a probing move against an enemy is disrespectful behavior, said the Alcade King indifferently. It was Mu Chang'e who was disrespectful. Sword 5. For Mu Chang'e formed a sword with his fingers. The Heavenly Tower trembled. The Yellow Springs had no way out. Crossing the bridge of helplessness, the peak of the sword had appeared once more in the world. In an instant, sword intent swept through the world. Dark clouds covered the horizon and thunder shook the heavens. Sword tribulation, limitless. The limitless king's might was world-shaking. The Alcade King stepped forward and a huge sword wheel appeared. Limitless sword light tore through the air, meeting the incoming attack. With a loud explosion, the peak of the sword techniques violently collided. The windless plains rapidly collapsed. Sand filled the sky and waves of dust spread out. Sword 7. Extreme Heaven. Before the waves of dust had even dissipated, Mu Chang'e's sword soared into the sky. His sword intent soared as he once again used one of Sword Sovereign's famous moves. The Heavenly Tower left his hand. The sand in the sky was drawn towards it and soared into the sky. Immediately, swords began to condense, forming a sky of swords. The Alcade King narrowed his eyes. He clenched his hand, and the Heavenly Tower returned to his hand. Sword tribulation, limitless. The sword tribulation appeared once more. Sword light soared from the ground like rain, shaking the heavens. Sword after sword collided in the world, rumbling and howling. Sword 8, Emperor's Sword. The Sword 7 appeared. Mu Chang'e once again grasped the Heavenly Tower. With a shout, he condensed the sword intent that filled the windless plains. The Emperor's Sword that had never appeared before appeared. The sword intent that filled the world rapidly converged in all directions. The Emperor's Sword caused all the swords in the world to submit. The Alcade King had never seen such a sword before. His vital energy soared, and the wind and clouds swirled around his sword. The endless sword met the sword. In the next moment, the two extremely brilliant sword lights collided in the mortal world. After a short moment of silence, there was a great tremor as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was caving in. The sword might that the windless plains could not bear dissipated for no reason. With a groan, the sword light pierced through his shoulder. His white robe was dyed red. The ultimate move had injured a king. On the other side, Mu Chang'e landed on the ground. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Sword Sovereign of the Tianfu sect, you live up to your name. Sword Sovereign of the Zhongzhou state, you are disappointing. After a round of fierce confrontation, the black-robed and white-robed figures stood facing each other. Their sword intent did not dissipate. Instead, it increased. The world-shaking battle of swords shocked all the spectators. The power displayed by the two sword divinities of this era was truly terrifying. So, it turned out that the sword could reach such a high level. Although the battle between the legendary swordsman of the eastern region and the Taibai Palace Lord had also shocked the world, the difference between the two was too great. The legendary swords could not be fully used from beginning to end. The shock it brought was not as clear as today. Although it's not obvious, the Alcade King is indeed at a disadvantage, Reverend Yusheng said worriedly. The Central Plains could not bear the result of the Alcade King's defeat. This was a devastating blow. Once the Alcade King was defeated, Heaven's Sanctum Supremes, who were already slightly stronger, would have an overwhelming advantage, causing the balance of the war to be completely unbalanced. Where is the military advisor? Why don't I see him? Reverend Qing Yu asked. I don't know. I haven't seen him since yesterday, Reverend Yusheng said. On the other side of the battle, 3 figures appeared. Reverend Bodhi, the Taibai Palace Lord, and Dean Bailu were quietly watching the battle. At the same time, they were on guard against that unknown expert from the heavenly sanctum. Are the 3 of you waiting for me? As he spoke, the void swirled, and a purple-robed man walked out. He looked at the 3 people before him and spoke indifferently. The 3 reverends' expressions sank. As expected, this person had come. Everyone, there's no need to be nervous. I'm just here to watch the battle. Today's main characters aren't us, so there's no need to waste our energy, said the purple-robed man. Just as everyone's attention was focused on the battle in the Windless Plains, 300 miles to the north, the path of the life-knowing swordsman who had come to watch the battle was completely blocked. Space shook, and a red-robed figure silently appeared. Their faces were exactly the same, and there was no difference at all. This scheme that had been planned for so long had finally revealed its killing move. Ningchen glanced at the vermilion bird in front of him and then at Fan Xinghong behind him. He immediately understood everything. Reverend Tian Xiang really thinks highly of me. He spent so much effort to set this up. So it was just to take my life, said Ningchen. If you die, no one in the 5 regions will be able to stop the heavenly sanctum, said Fan Xinghong coldly. I'm very curious how you and this vermilion bird that hasn't fully transformed will be able to kill me, said Ningchen. You'll know soon enough. Fan Xinghong formed a hand seal, and her aura rapidly rose. In a breath, she broke through the 3 disaster realm and reached the half-step sovereign realm. A secret art? Unfortunately, it's still not enough. Ningchen sneered. His silhouette flashed quickly. The white fan, clear sun, and Li fire appeared. Sword light soared into the sky and started the battle. Chapter 568. In the windless plain, sand was billowing. The clash of swords was getting hotter and hotter. The surging sand waves showed how intense this battle of swordsmen was. Divine weapons clashed, and sword radiance spread out. The battle between 2 kings shocked all the experts of the 2 realms. It was hard to believe that the power of humans could reach such a level. The Separation and Heavenly Tower were 2 divine weapons that stood side by side. They were like 2 peerless swordsmen fighting. The sounds of their swords were mournful, creating the most beautiful harmony. In the battle, both of them were dyed red. They were at the same peak, but different sword wills bloomed in the sky. The spectators were mesmerized. The 2 kings stood side by side. They were the only ones on the sword. Their swords surpassed the limit and showed the power of the celestial path that was rarely seen in the world. The treading celestial path, which had not appeared in thousands of years, was like a dream at this moment. It was as if it had appeared in the world. 9th sword. The sword wills kept rising and accumulating. The 9th sword appeared, and everything became still for a moment. Then, the magnificent sword radiance rushed into the sky. The world turned into a world of swords. Divine domain. The Tianfu war god opened the divine domain on the sword. The sky was filled with thousands of swords. The most shocking sword move made the world tremble. The sword wills spread, and the human supremes retreated quickly. They could not hide the shock on their faces. The Tianfu sword venerable was the miracle of the sword world. Outside the battle, the venerables of the Tianfu war god had mixed feelings. In the past 100 years, the Tianfu Holy Land had always been a mountain that the various factions could not cross. There was no doubt that the Star Venerable who controlled the fate of one star was the strongest person in the Tianfu War God. However, the person who brought despair to the various factions was not the Star Venerable who rarely fought, but the Tianfu War God, Muchanga. 100 years ago, when Mount Digui rebelled, the Sword Venerable took action and flattened the entire Mount Digui. Since then, the various factions had been silenced. 10 years ago, the Sword Venerable made a mistake in comprehending the sword. His soul was injured, and he fell into a coma. Only then did the various factions breathe a sigh of relief. If the existence of the Star Venerable was an illusory deterrent, then the existence of the Sword Venerable made the various factions of the Tianfu War God feel powerless. It was difficult to surpass him. In the battle, the divine domain on the sword appeared. Within 100 li, the sword light crisscrossed and crisscrossed. The void was unable to withstand the might of this extreme martial art. Piece by piece, it collapsed. This shocking move caused the heaven and earth to wail unceasingly. Brilliance flashed across Alcade King's eyes. The separate gather sword in his hand shone brightly. The move of sword testimony had also appeared in the world. 8 void reincarnation, sword tribulation, unruffled. The sword of oblivion, the sword of oblivion. The white-robed Alcade King stepped into the air, and his black hair instantly turned white. The century-old sword god of the Central Plains, Oblivion, proved his sword and regretted it for the rest of his life. The most powerful sword had broken through the god realm. It cut through the sword flow and reached the sword venerate. At the final moment of the world's most powerful sword art, the sword of Oblivion broke through the god realm. Just as the venerable sword was about to be defeated, the scattered sword light suddenly flew back and condensed into one. 10th sword Juxian, a sword that had never been seen in the mortal world, appeared at this moment. A terrifying sword pressure spread out, and the sandstorm in the sky disappeared immediately. The windless plain sank more than 100 feet. The two extremes on the sword collided with a loud bang. The 9 heavens trembled, and lightning flashed across the void, illuminating the dim world. In the shocking aftermath, 2 figures flew out, covered in red, and landed on the ground. The tips of their swords pierced the ground and stopped. In the situation of a draw, only blood splashed and dyed the surrounding ground red. The most powerful battle was about to end with the final bell. Venerable sword, that's enough. The plan has succeeded. Stop. At this moment, outside the battle, a man in purple appeared in a flash and said calmly, "I can't stop." A faint light flashed in Muchanga's eyes. Then, his blood origin suddenly burst out. The final sword intent broke through the restraints of his physical body and rushed to the 9 heavens. Sword. 11. 300 miles north of the Windless Plain, Red Sparrow and Fan Xinghong had trapped and killed the Knowing Destiny state cultivators. Ningchen attacked first. He used the clear sunly fire as a sword and rushed toward Fan Xinghong. The vermilion bird moved. Its red feathers gathered and turned into a blood-red sword. It swung the sword and blocked the leaf fire white fan. Sword light surged. The 2 people who were like mirror images started fighting again. Every move came from the same source, but they were also different. At the same time, Fan Xinghong stomped her foot and moved her blade. The extremely fast blade swept past like a willow in the wind. It was hard to distinguish. The blade, sword, and fan clashed. With a bang, the aftermath spread and the 3 of them took half a step back. Ningchen knew that his body couldn't be stabilized, so he didn't want to continue fighting. He stepped on the water and retreated. "You want to leave? Don't even think about it." Red Sparrow's figure flashed. She turned her sword and blocked the water. Every move was like a prophet. After 3 moves, Ningchen felt the pressure on his body double. He was restrained everywhere when he used his moves. Knowing Destiny Marquis, you won't be able to escape today. Fan Xinghong pressed forward again. Her willow blade cut through the soul and pressed forward. The blade and sword worked together. Every move was fast and heavy. It was as if every move was predicted. Ningchen was in danger. The 2 most important people in Tianxiang's trap had both fought with Knowing Destiny Marquis before. After Tianxiang broke through them one by one, they became knowing destiny Marquis, trapping the enemy and forcing him to his death. The two worked well together. Each move was more vicious than the last. In order to get rid of Tian Xiang's biggest problem, Fan Xinghong attacked without defending. Her moves were vicious and unavoidable. In the blink of an eye, 10 moves had passed. With a slash, the sword light brushed past Fan Xinghong's shoulder and cut through his red clothes. A strand of black hair fell down. Fourth sword, River of Forgetfulness. An opportunity appeared. Fan Xinghong used her willow blade. Sword Venerable's sealed move reappeared in the killing trap. Due to the limitations of her body, it was difficult for the sealed sword to reach its full potential. However, at this critical moment, the River of Forgetfulness became a fatal move. You're going too far. At the moment of life and death, Ning Chen's eyes were cold. He no longer cared about hiding his identity. He waved his fan and pushed Vermilion Bird away. He retreated 10 feet and stepped forward. His phoenix origin and demonic aura rose rapidly. Sword style, bloody path. With a sword style, a demonic move appeared. A bloody shadow rushed out in an instant. Its murderous aura was so dense that it was suffocating. Clear Sunsley fire was covered in blood. With a bang, the three weapons collided. The aftershocks spread for thousands of feet. Vermilion Bird and Fan Xinghong's mouths were dyed red. Different moves and different auras turned the situation around instantly. Sword style, bloody flame. The demonic body moved again. Each move was stronger than the last. Terrifying murderous aura condensed around his body. Endless bloody flames rushed from the ground into the sky. In the next moment, Fan Xinghong's red clothes flashed and the bloody flames burned the sky. Both of them focused and held their weapons together to block the demonic move. However, blood spurted out. Unable to withstand the demonic move's power, the two of them were sent flying again. Retreat! Vermilion Bird didn't want to fight anymore. She shouted and used her talent to quickly retreat from the battle. He's gone. You can stay behind. Ning Chen's murderous aura had already risen. A scarlet light flashed in his eyes. He rushed forward and arrived in front of the young girl. His white fan surged with bloody light. Fan Xinghong blocked with her saber. Her mouth was dyed red again. However, even though she was injured, her saber didn't stop at all. It streaked across the sky and once again pressed forward. Ning Chen snorted coldly. He opened his white fan and blocked the saber light in front of his chest. Then he used his sword fingers to break through Fan Xinghong's qi. Fan Xinghong didn't dodge at all. Instead, she took the attack head-on. The willow saber in her hand changed hands and once again pierced towards the person in front of her. Do you think it's that easy? Ning Chen leaned to the side. The moment they passed, he condensed Yuan in his left hand and used all his strength to strike the young girl's chest. With a muffled groan, his palm broke her heart. In an instant, blood filled the sky and dyed the wasteland red. Fan Xinghong was sent flying dozens of feet away. The moment she landed, she used the momentum to quickly leave. Looking at the disappearing figure, the murderous aura in Ning Chen's eyes gradually disappeared. What a celestial minister! If the phoenix body really was here today, it would be difficult for him to escape unscathed. Within Eternal Heaven City, Xiao Libi was sitting in front of a chessboard. However, the piece in his hand had yet to be placed. His heart was filled with worry, and his heart was in chaos. He was unable to calmly make his plans like before. Celestial Minister. Just at this moment, a black light flashed and Fan Xinghong appeared. 2 steps later, she fell to the ground. She was no longer able to hold her saber. Xinghong. Xiao Libi's pupils constricted. He quickly rushed forward and knelt down to help her up. I'm sorry. I failed. Fan Xinghong vomited a mouthful of blood from within the celestial minister's embrace. Her spiritual sense was gradually fading as she weakly spoke. Didn't we agree that within 10 moves, you would immediately withdraw? Xiao Libi's heart was filled with pain. He is a great enemy of the celestial minister. I don't want him to live. Blood flowed from Fan Xinghong's mouth. I understand. You're too foolish. Your meridians have been destroyed, and I'm unable to save you, said Xiao Bieli. Enough. Enough, Minister of Heaven. I came back to remind you that Marquis Tianfu Starshire may not be the same. Before he could finish speaking, his arms fell to his sides. Before he could finish speaking, he disappeared with the wind. Xinghong. Xiao Bieli's body trembled, and the pain made it difficult for him to breathe. The title of Marquis, the position of Prime Minister, the position of supremacy in the world, at this moment, seemed so pale and useless. That night, it was raining heavily. The little girl, who was only 5 or 6 years old, had nowhere to go. Her little clothes were tattered, and she fainted in front of the Prime Minister's residence. That night, he saved the little girl and took care of her day and night. In the end, he saved the little girl's life. From that day onwards, the little girl stayed by his side. They helped each other in times of need. For more than 20 years, they never left each other. After 20 years of ups and downs, the little girl had slowly grown up. Accompanying her had already become a habit. He had never thought that the little girl who had always been by his side would one day leave his side. The heavens were merciless. They used a game of chess to determine the fate of the chess piece. Victory and defeat were commonplace in the game of chess. However, the black and white pieces of chess had a short life. Who could they talk to? The falling leaves in the sky fell onto the chessboard. A single piece moved gently. It was as if the falling leaves were talking about their short lives. Not far away, the sleeping girl was so quiet. This time, it was impossible for her to wake up again. Heavens, Minister of Heaven, so the person you treasured is also on your chessboard. A bitter laugh echoed through the cold wind. A figure slowly stood up. It was impossible to see his expression. Holding the sleeping girl, he walked east step by step. Chapter 569. In the windless plains, the master of the Pill Tower, Celestial Venerable Ling, appeared to stop the battle. However, how could the battle of the king's sword be stopped so easily? Sword 11. With the 11th sword, blood spurted out from Mu Changa's body like mist. Cracks appeared on the heavenly hearing tower. Before the move was unleashed, boundless sword pressure engulfed the entire windless plains. Comprehending the sword in a day, 3 souls were damaged. Sleeping for 10 years, the sword that couldn't be tolerated in the mortal world finally appeared today. The sword's extremity was limitless. The soaring sword will shook the heavens and earth within 100 miles. A shocking sword move. Around Mu Changa, a waterfall of sword light surged and roared. It was magnificent and boundless, a perfect move that exhausted all human strength. In this battle of the pinnacle swordsman, it transcended the limits and appeared in the mortal world. In an instant, the windless plains that was ravaged by the battle quickly collapsed. Large areas of land collapsed, and the shocking aftershocks continued to spread in all directions. Celestial Venerable Ling saw this and her expression changed. She quickly retreated and left the battle. 100 miles away, the expressions of the human sovereigns also changed. They didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly retreated. Alcade Sr. At this moment, a red shadow flashed past. Ning Chen, who had just escaped from the killing trap, rushed over and saw a shocking scene. Ning Chen, from today onwards, the future of the central state is in your hands. In the battle, Alcade King looked back and softly instructed. He then stepped into the air, and the separate gather sword hummed softly before turning into dust and dissipating. Immortality is useless, immortality is foolish, sword calamity, soul burial. Amidst the sound of dust waves, a soul-stirring sword. The king's form dissipated, and the 3 souls transformed into swords. It was born out of the corporeal body and surpassed the limits of the mortal world, slashing open the path to immortality. The 2 extremes that stood side by side and the final sword that abandoned everything broke into the realm of immortality at the same time. They were like the 2 most dazzling divine suns in the world. Endless brilliance could be seen clearly for thousands of miles. In the next moment, the 2 extremes collided and shook violently. The aftershocks swept hundreds of miles, and the entire windless plains was instantly destroyed, becoming history. At the edge of the battle, the spectators were all affected and were sent flying. The blood around them churned violently. Alcade Sr. Outside the aftershocks, Ning Chen barely stabilized his body. He took a step and rushed towards the center of the battle. At the same time, the human sovereigns also reacted. Their figures flashed as they rushed toward the battlefield. After the great battle, not a single part of the windless plains was left intact. On the sunken ground, there were intersecting huge gullies that were so deep that the bottom could not be seen. The shocking battle caused everyone present to feel fear in their hearts. Senior. Ning Chen rushed into the battlefield and looked around for traces of the Alcade King. However, all he could see was a mess and he couldn't see anyone else. At this moment, a black-robed figure fell from the sky and crashed onto the ground. His body was covered in blood and there was no trace of life in him. Sword Venerable. Celestial Venerable Ling appeared and took a step forward to Muchanga. She flipped her palm and her expression immediately changed. At the same time, the Grand White Mansion Lord, Venerable Bodhi, and Dean Bai Lu appeared and surrounded him. Jiming Marquis, the battle is over. Do you still want to increase the casualties? Celestial Venerable Ling ignored the three people around her and looked at the red-clothed youth not far away. Let him go. Ning Chen's eyes flashed with coldness as he spoke. Upon hearing this, the three venerables opened up a path and didn't stop him. A rational decision, Celestial Venerable Ling said and left with Mu Chang'e in a flash. Military advisor. Venerable Xian Zhen and the rest also appeared in the battlefield and spoke with solemn expressions. Return to competitive Edge City. Ning Chen ordered and didn't stay any longer. He turned and left. The venerables accepted the order and followed silently. No one expected this result. In this battle, both the Heaven's Mansion and the Inner Realms suffered heavy losses. There was no winner. Sword Venerable's 11th sword was no longer a move of the mortal world. Alcade King also used his life to execute a move that surpassed the limits of the mortal world. In the end, the battle between the two was still undecided. In competitive Edge City, in the Hall of Venerables, Zhao Liusu and Venerable Li Shan were anxious as they waited for the outcome of the battle. The dazzling sword light just now could be clearly seen from thousands of miles away in competitive Edge City. No one could have predicted the result of this battle. Military advisor. Seeing the red-clothed youth appear, Zhao Liusu immediately went forward and asked, "What's the result?" "The entire army of the Heavenly Prefecture will be here soon. Alliance Venerable should prepare for battle as soon as possible." Ning Chen spoke in an indifferent tone before leaving the hall. Behind him, Venerable Xian Zhen and the rest made way for the military advisor. No one dared to stop him. What happened? Zhao Liusu felt that the atmosphere wasn't right and asked solemnly. Alcade King died in battle, and Sword Venerable's fate is unknown. However, even if he survives, he's crippled. Venerable Xian Zhen sighed softly. Zhao Liusu heard this and trembled. How could this be? Alliance Venerable, now's not the time to be sad. What the military advisor said just now is the most important thing. Venerable Li Shan walked forward and reminded him seriously. Zhao Liusu nodded and suppressed the heaviness in his heart. Pass down the order, prepare for battle. The venerables received the order and replied respectfully. In Eternal Heaven City, purple light gathered, and Celestial Venerable Ling appeared. She carried Mu Chang'e, whose soul had been damaged. The once famous Sword Venerable had all his meridians shattered, and he was now a cripple that was neither alive nor dead. Her consciousness swept over, and Celestial Venerable Ling's eyes focused. She rushed out and headed 100 miles to the east. Outside Eternal Heaven City, under a red maple tree, Heaven Minister stood silently. In front of him was a lonely new grave covered with falling red leaves. Heaven Minister. Celestial Venerable Ling walked out and said. Xiao Bieli turned his head and saw the figure in her arms. His body trembled violently. Chang'e. 2 steps forward, Xiao Bieli's raised hand trembled. In a day, the successive blows made the usually calm minister of Heavenly Manor unable to hide the pain in his heart. Sword Venerable used the 11th sword, and I couldn't stop him. Celestial Venerable Ling blamed herself. It shouldn't be like this, it shouldn't be like this. Xiao Bieli's hands cracked as he clenched them. He was filled with regret. Why? Heaven Minister, Alcade King has fallen, and Central Prefecture's last hope is gone. Why don't we take this opportunity to attack and wipe out the allied forces? Celestial Venerable Ling said solemnly. Xiao Bieli looked at the unconscious Muchanga and was speechless. After a long time, he said slowly, "Go." Celestial Venerable Ling respectfully accepted the order. Half a day later, the entire army of Heavenly Manor marched north. Their vast aura covered the sky. With the strength of a realm and the help of human sovereigns, they were unstoppable. They broke through the Allied forces' defense line like a hot knife through butter. City after city, fortress after fortress, the army of Heavenly Manor continued to march north. Their attacks were endless and abnormally ferocious. Central Prefecture was in danger. The various sects were terrified and immediately sent out strong practitioners to reinforce the front lines. However, it was too late. In less than half a month, Central Prefecture's allied forces were defeated again and again, losing dozens of cities. Competition City, Hall of Venerables. An oppressive atmosphere spread. Human sovereigns were silent. They felt deep despair and helplessness for Central Prefecture's fate. Beside the main seat, Red Shirt was in deep thought. Zhao Liusu wanted to say something but stopped. The anxiety on his face was difficult to hide. From the beginning of the war until now, every word he said had become reality. Alcade King died in battle, and Central Prefecture was completely defeated. It would be difficult for them to fight against Heavenly Manor's army. Beneath the main seat, Reverend Li Shan finally couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and asked, "Advisor, is the defeat really irreversible?" Beside the main seat, Ning Chen came back to his senses. He looked at the sovereigns below and said calmly, "Yes, peace talks." Hearing this, the sovereigns were stunned. Peace talks? How was that possible? Advisor, the conditions that Heavenly Manor gave before were already too much. Now that they have the absolute advantage, they'll definitely go from bad to worse, Zhao Liusu said in confusion. The conditions won't go too far, but it'll be hard for people to accept. If we want to reverse the situation, this peace talks are necessary. Ning Chen stood up and said indifferently. He then walked out of the hall. Alliance Sovereign, please arrange for the peace talks between Heavenly Minister and Central Prefecture as soon as possible. As for who will negotiate, it's not important. His last words kept echoing in the hall. Everyone looked at each other. No one understood what the military advisor was trying to do. Alliance Sovereign, Reverend Xianzhen stood up and said, "There's no need to say any more. Do as the advisor says." Zhao Liusu raised her hand to stop him from continuing. Yes. The Xianzhen sovereign helplessly sighed and bowed. In Tianheng City, the Central Prefecture's peace talks letter was delivered. Dong Sun, Zhenyang, Tai Xian, and the other sovereigns looked at the Heavenly Minister in front of them, waiting for his reply. If they could take over Central Prefecture without shedding a drop of blood, that would be the best choice. Although the Heavenly Manor had the advantage, they had also suffered great losses. Furthermore, the time left for them was decreasing. The Heavenly Manor's destruction was right in front of them. The sooner they ended the war, the more people they could save. 3 days from now, in Tianluo City, we'll negotiate, said Xiao Bieli coldly. Dong Sun, Zhenyang, and Tai Xian bowed deeply. They knew that it wasn't easy for the Heavenly Minister to give up on his personal feelings and agree to negotiate. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In Tianluo City, human sovereigns appeared one after another at the front lines of the two armies. They were all here to negotiate. In order to show their sincerity, Zhao Liusu personally came. On the Heavenly Manor's side, the Heavenly Minister also appeared in Tianluo City to negotiate. "Where's the Jiming Marquis? Why isn't he here?" asked Xiao Bieli as he glanced at the various representatives of the Central Prefecture. "The final decision is still in our hands, so it's more appropriate for us to directly negotiate," said Zhao Liusu. Xiao Bieli sneered, "Do we have the right to do that?" The Xianzhen sovereign was infuriated. He suddenly sat up, but Zhao Liusu glared at him. "We came with sincerity. The heavenly minister's overbearing words will only make it difficult to negotiate, said Zhao Liusu. The Jiming Marquis hasn't arrived, so I don't want to waste words. Our conditions are still the same as before. The various powers will withdraw from the central prefecture, and the heavenly manor will promise not to invade the other 4 regions. Otherwise, the day the central prefecture's war ends will be the day the flames of war ignites in the next region, said Xiao Bieli coldly. Bailey, Reverend Li Shan, and the others' expressions sank. Such conditions clearly meant that they didn't want to negotiate. Chapter 570. 1,000 miles north of Heaven Luo City, at Wanxing Pass, Ning Chen walked over while holding Yiner's hand. Qing Ning followed beside them, not knowing why they had come here. Ning Chen handed a bunch of flower seeds to the little girl. Plant these seeds well. Once you're done, come ask me for more. Yiner obediently answered. She ran to the side with the flower seeds and began to plant them one by one. This is? Qing Ning looked at the flower seeds that the little girl had dropped. There seemed to be something wrong with the devil's snare flower seeds. This is a devilized devil's snare flower seed I obtained in the devil we'll see. The flowers it blossoms are extremely poisonous, and it's hard to resist. Ning Chen picked up the flower seeds and explained, You don't plan on negotiating? Qing Ning quickly reacted and narrowed her eyes. Negotiations require equal rights to speak. Otherwise, it'll just be one-sided bullying, said Ning Chen calmly. The current Central Plains didn't have that right, so this negotiation wouldn't have any effect. Your target is the Heavenly Mansion's army? Asked Qing Ning. No, the Heavenly Mansion's army isn't the key to this war. The true deciding factor is the 2 realms' human supremes, said Ning Chen as he buried the flower seeds. Can the devil's snare flowers poison affect supremes? Asked Qing Ning. No, but it can draw the Heavenly Mansion's human supremes here, said Ning Chen. So what if they draw them here? The Alliance's current supremes aren't enough to keep the Heavenly Mansion's human supremes here, frowned Qing Ning. I don't expect them to be of any use. Ever since they retreated in front of Heaven Eternal City, I no longer trusted them. Ning Chen straightened his body and smiled. Speak properly. Why are you still pretending in front of me? Scolded Qing Ning. When Ning Chen heard this, the smile on his face disappeared, and he said, The phoenix physique left me something before she left. It just so happens that I can use it here. Sister Qing Ning will know about it soon. I'm done planting them. At this moment Yiner jogged over, stretched out her fair and tender little hand, and laughed happily. Ning Chen smiled and placed another bunch of flower seeds in her hand. Yiner is amazing. I still have a lot more. I'll try to plant them all today. All right. Yiner nodded, then turned around and ran away, continuing to work. You've already killed too many people. If possible, try to avoid killing as much as possible. Qing Ning sighed. Don't worry, Sister Qing Ning. I know what to do, Ning Chen replied. At the same time, in Tianluo City, the negotiations between the 2 realms had reached an impasse. The conditions offered by Tianxiang were difficult for the venerables of the central state to accept. For thousands of years, the foundation of the various sects had been in the central state. How could they give it up? Celestial Minister, the heavenly sanctum's goal in invading the inner realm is to plunder resources. There is no need to be so overbearing when it comes to territory, said Venerable Li. The heavenly abode wants resources, but the heavenly abode won't give up territory. Xiao Bieli slowly said. Zhao Liusu's eyes darkened as she said, Heaven Minister's attitude is that he doesn't want to negotiate at all? Peace talks? You were the ones who suggested it. My realm merely stated the conditions for withdrawing, said Xiao Bieli coldly. It's a matter of resources. Zhongzhou will try our best to satisfy your demands. However, no matter what, the various sects may withdraw from Zhongzhou. This is our bottom line, said Zhao Liusu. If that's the case, then we'll meet on the battlefield. Xiao Bieli wasn't moved at all. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere became abnormally heavy. The negotiations that were about to continue caused all the venerables present to be on full alert. Celestial Minister, please wait for a day. I need to discuss your conditions with the military advisor first before making a decision, said Zhao Liusu gravely. At this time tomorrow, I'll be waiting for your reply. Xiao Bieli stood up and spoke indifferently, and then he strode off. The venerables of the heavenly sanctum followed closely behind him. Within the peace discussion hall, the venerables of the alliance fell silent. Without a doubt, this negotiation had failed. Venerable Li, go invite the military advisor, said Zhao Liusu. Yes. Venerable Li stood up and accepted the order. In Wanxing Pass, the sky gradually darkened. Yiner's 3 minutes of labor had long since disappeared. She was sleeping soundly in Qing Ning's embrace. Not far away, Ning Chen was carefully burying the mandala flower seeds one by one. By the time he finished planting all the seeds, the sky had already turned completely dark. Above the 9 heavens, the moon shone brightly, sprinkling down a faint chill. Ning Chen stood in the wilderness, and with a flip of his hand, a waterfall of spring water surged out. It sprinkled down like rain, perfectly watering every piece of land. In the next moment, a strange scene occurred. Mandala flowers grew one after another, and black flowers bloomed. It was extremely beautiful. Yiner woke up in a daze. Seeing the flowers growing around her, her eyes lit up. She slid down from Qing Ning's embrace and ran forward, reaching out to touch them. Seeing this, Ning Chen stepped forward and picked her up. He said softly, "There's poison. If you touch them, you'll get worms." When Yiner heard this, she hurriedly retracted her hand. Her delicate little face was filled with fear. "Let's go to Tianluo City," said Ning Chen as he glanced at Qing Ning. Okay. Qing Ning nodded and followed behind. In Tianluo City, in the Alliance camp, Venerable Li returned and anxiously said, "Alliance Venerable, the military advisor isn't in competitive Peak City." Hearing this, Zhao Liusu's expression froze. She suddenly stood up and said, "The military advisor didn't leave any message?" "No," Venerable Li shook his head. "Send someone to look for him," Zhao Liusu said. "There's no need to look for him." At this moment, Hong Yi appeared outside the main hall and walked into the hall step by step. Military advisor, Venerable Li bowed. "Venerable Li, you can leave first." "I have something to discuss with the Alliance Venerable," Ning Chen said calmly. "Yes." Venerable Li accepted the order and immediately turned to leave the main hall. "Military advisor, where did you go?" Zhao Liusu walked down from the main seat and asked in confusion. "Wanxing Pass," Ning Chen said honestly. "Why did you go there?" Zhao Liusu frowned and asked. "To prepare for a rainy day, or rather, to add some variables to this war. I'll explain this to the Alliance Venerable in the future. How's the peace talk going?" Ning Chen said. Zhao Liusu shook her head and sighed. "There's no room for peace talks at all. The conditions set by the Minister of Heaven are not something that the sects in Zhongzhou can accept." "The sects will give up the entire Zhongzhou?" Ning Chen asked. Zhao Liusu nodded. "Even resources won't work?" Ning Chen asked once more. Zhao Liusu nodded once more. "Strange." Ning Chen's eyes flashed. There were only 2 goals in war, territory and resources. But the Heavenly Palace planet was very far from the inner realm. Compared to territory, resources seemed to be more important. In their 2 talks, the Minister of Heaven had refused to give up on the matter of territory. It was truly strange. "Military advisor, tomorrow is the final deadline. Do you have any ideas?" Zhao Liusu's expression was grave. "Peace talks absolutely won't allow the Heavenly Palace planet to give up. This war will continue. Other than to draw the Heavenly Palace planet's attention, my other goal is to test the Minister of Heaven's bottom line," said Ning Chen calmly. Zhao Liusu narrowed her eyes. "Then what about tomorrow's negotiations?" "I'll go talk." Alliance Venerable can go back and arrange for the sects to continue preparing for war. In addition, before the war reaches Wanxing Pass, we'll fight to the death," said Ning Chen. Zhao Liusu was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "Military advisor, can you tell me the truth? In your heart, do you really think the Central Plains has a chance of winning this war?" Ning Chen smiled. "Alliance Venerable, there's a saying. If you use someone, don't doubt them. If you doubt them, don't use them. Since I've accepted the position of military advisor, I'll think of a way for the Central Plains to win this war. I'm not so bored as to waste my time fighting a war I'm sure we'll lose. With military advisor's words, I'm relieved. I'll go back as soon as possible. As for the peace talks, I'll leave them to you, said Zhao Liusu. Don't worry. Ning Chen nodded. At the agreed time in the peace discussion hall, both sides arrived. Xiao Bieli looked at the red-robed youth in front of him. Killing intent flashed across his face, and he icily said, "Greeting you still came?" The Minister of Heaven's unyielding attitude forced Greeting Marquis to come. Ning Chen smiled. I'm very curious. Now that things have reached this point, do you really think peace talks can solve this problem? Sneered Xiao Bieli. If the Central Plains sects want peace talks, then the Heavenly Sanctum's sects should want peace talks as well. Similarly, Greeting Marquis also hopes to resolve this war peacefully. The only one who doesn't want to talk is the Minister of Heaven, said Ning Chen indifferently. Is that important? As long as you can satisfy my realm's conditions, I'll immediately order my troops to retreat, said Xiao Bieli coldly. The Minister of Heaven has forced the Central Plains sects into a dead end. Aren't you worried that they'll choose to destroy each other? Asked Ning Chen calmly. Even if they want to destroy each other, they need to have the strength to do so. Greeting Marquis, you should know why the Central Plains has been able to hold on until now. If it weren't for the other 4 regions and your help, the Central Plains would have long since fallen to my heavenly sanctum. However, Xiao Bieli's tone changed. Do you think the other 4 regions can provide even more assistance? Although my realm came from afar and can't take down the entire inner realm, it's more than enough to take down 2 regions. No one would complain about having more resources and territory. Don't you think so? The Minister of Heaven's words are correct. However, the Heavenly Sanctum probably doesn't have the time. How long do you think the Minister of Heaven thinks the Central Plains sects can delay the war if Greeting Marquis does its best? Smiled Ning Chen. Xiao Bieli's eyes turned cold. Greeting Marquis, being too smart isn't necessarily a good thing. If you really do that, then once the Heavenly Sanctum takes over the Central Plains, their next target will be the Eastern region. What an unpleasant conversation. Ning Chen's expression also turned cold. He stood up and said, since we can't come to an agreement, then let's fight it out on the battlefield. Minister of Heaven, Greeting Marquis will be waiting for you to take the initiative to propose peace talks. That day will never come, said Xiao Bieli coldly. Nothing is absolute. Minister of Heaven, let's meet again on the battlefield. Ning Chen stood up and smiled. He took Yinu's hand and left. Chapter 571. War raged in Zhongzhou. Tianfu's army, which had been unstoppable, met with the most stubborn resistance from the Alliance army. Between Tianluo City and Wanxing Pass, the armies of the 2 territories kept fighting. No one was willing to back down easily. In Jingfeng City, battle reports were sent to the Hall of Venerables one after another. The expressions of the human sovereigns were getting worse and worse. Zhongzhou couldn't hold on any longer. A month after the peace talks, all the sects had sent out all their forces. Together with the vanguard troops from the other 3 territories, they tried their best to stop Tianfu. However, the difference in strength between the 2 armies was too big. It was only a matter of time before they were defeated. Zhao Liusu stood up and asked, when will the reinforcements from the other 3 territories arrive? At least a month, Venerable Li Shan replied. What about the requests for help sent to Heavenly Music Parlor, Tianfu Mountain, and Southwind Ridge? Did they reply? Zhao Liusu asked. The Lord of the Heavenly Music Pavilion does not see outsiders. The people I sent were directly blocked outside the Heavenly Music Valley by a woman. Tianfu Mountain has been sealed for several years for some unknown reason, and no one can go up. As for the remaining 7 sects, the supreme sages of 4 sects have agreed to come and help, while the other 3 have politely refused, Venerable Li Shan said in detail. For Zhao Liusu squinted her eyes. Since the start of the war, more than 10 human sovereigns had come from the other 3 territories. This was probably the limit of the 3 territories' help. It would be difficult to ask for more help in the future. Zhao Liusu turned her head and asked the young man in red, military advisor, we've done our best. How much longer do we have to hold on? Beside the main seat, Ningchen recovered from his contemplation and said slowly, enough. Before sunset tomorrow, the allied forces of all sects must withdraw from Wanqing Pass. In addition, venerables, please be on standby at any time. I don't want to emphasize the same thing again and again. This is the last chance for the Central Plains. If you can't grasp it, please find someone else. Zhao Liusu looked at the venerables and said coldly, tomorrow, if anyone dares to disobey the military advisor's orders, don't blame me for being ruthless. The venerables accepted the order and replied respectfully. After the meeting, the venerables left one after another. Only Zhao Liusu, Ningchen, and Yin were left in the main hall. Of course, the little girl could play on her own, and no one would disturb the other. Military advisor, a month ago, you said that Heaven's Sanctum might be in urgent need of time. If Central Prefecture continues to prolong the war, is it feasible? Zhao Liusu asked seriously. Impossible. Ningchen shook his head and said, dragging out the battle can only be used as a bargaining chip. It's not a feasible method. The reason why the Heavenly Mansion's army is in such a hurry to attack the Central Plains is most likely because there's a problem with the Heavenly Mansion star. However, the majority of the Heavenly Mansion's Xiantian forces have already been transferred to the Central Plains. Dragging out the battle will not only not benefit us, it will also infuriate the Heavenly Mansion. When Zhao Liusu heard this, she frowned slightly and said, the Allied army's innate combat power has no advantage over Heaven's Sanctum. In addition, the Supreme's combat power is at a disadvantage. How can we turn this situation around? If we can't get along well, then we'll make use of the right time and the right place. We can't be limited by the inertia of our thinking in war. Although there aren't many things that can threaten the human sovereigns, it's not like there aren't any. We'll use whatever we have, Ningchen said calmly. Karmic luck, earth veins, laws, fate, Zhao Liusu said slowly. Ningchen nodded and said, after all, this war is being fought in the Central Plains. The right time and the right place are on the Central Plains side. Being good at using what we already have is more useful than any reinforcements. Although that's the case, it's hard to use karmic luck or earth veins. Even if they could be used, the Heavenly Mansion's human sovereigns wouldn't be so stupid as to send themselves to their deaths, Zhao Liusu said with a puzzled expression. If they don't want to come, then just invite them. If the Alliance sovereigns are interested tomorrow night, you can go and watch the battle. There's no need to stay in competitive Peak City for now. I think that the Heavenly Minister won't be in the mood to pay attention to this place tomorrow night, Ningchen said calmly. In front of Wanqing Pass, the Allied army's leaders, who had been defeated time and time again, finally received orders from competitive Peak City to retreat. 6 human sovereigns appeared and blocked the Heavenly Mansion's army, covering the retreat of the Allied army. At Wanqing Pass, the Devil's Snare flowers stretched for thousands of feet. The black flower buds were so beautiful that people couldn't help but touch them. Boom! Thunder rumbled in the sky and dark clouds roiled, covering the setting sun. In the distance, a figure in a blue and white dress appeared. She looked at the red-robed youth beside her and said, "You owe me a favor." "Miss Bai, how can you ask for favors when friends help each other?" Ningchen smiled. "If you don't want to, then I can stop." Bai Yunlian raised his hand, and the roiling dark clouds in the sky immediately showed signs of dissipating. Seeing this, Ningchen immediately compromised. He helplessly said, "I'll agree to a favor." Within Wanqing Pass, the Allied army retreated. The 6 human sovereigns also retreated, no longer continuing to fight. Behind them, the Heavenly Mansion's army split into 3 groups. One of them quickly reached Wanqing Pass and took over the Central Plains #1 stronghold. Outside Wanqing Pass, Ningchen looked at the Heavenly Mansion's army and said, "Miss Bai, it's your turn." Bai Yunlian nodded. He raised his hand, and the dark clouds in the sky roiled. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, and heavy rain poured down. At this moment, within Wanqing Pass, the budding Devil's Snare flowers were being watered by the rain mixed with Heavenly Craft spring water, and they bloomed one by one. The Devil's transformation bloomed, and a black mist curled up. It wasn't affected by the rain and spread out. At the same time, devil's vines spread out, constantly searching for life and nutrients. This shocking scene was like the nightmare of the Devil Wheel Ocean. The Heavenly Mansion's army was shocked. The soldiers closest to the devil's flowers were bound by the vines, and their vitality was instantly devoured. Destroy these flowers. Within the Heavenly Mansion's army, the 4 human sovereigns reacted and ordered. Once the order was given, the Heavenly Mansion's soldiers quickly destroyed the devil's flowers, uprooting all the devil's snare flowers. It's useless. Outside Wanqing Pass, Ningchen coldly smiled. Within the pass, the destroyed devil's flowers were scattered all over the ground. Suddenly, a soldier staggered and vomited black blood before falling down powerlessly. Following that, more and more people fell to the ground as black blood flowed out of their mouths. Retreat. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, the 4 human sovereigns immediately gave the order to retreat. We can't retreat. Hong Yi walked over from outside Wanqing Pass and poured her yuan into her palm. In the next moment, the Yellow Springs seal opened, sealing off all paths of retreat. 6 human sovereigns appeared at the same time and used yuan spirit seals to seal the Heavenly Mansion's army. Within Wanqing Pass, the ground was covered in devil's flowers, and the poisonous mist continued to spread. More and more soldiers were poisoned, and cries rang out everywhere. Guard your yuan and qi. Protect your heart. Don't panic. Supreme Arcane shouted. He turned his palm and condensed essence energy to help the general beside him dispel the poison in his body. Hearing this, the Heavenly Mansion's army gradually stabilized and sat down cross-legged, circulating their yuan to resist the poisonous mist. How is it? Another Heavenly Abode Supremacy stepped forward and said with a grave expression. The poison of these devil flowers isn't unstoppable, but the army is trapped here. As long as we can't get out, we'll be corroded by the poisonous mist. Sooner or later, we won't be able to hold on, said Sovereign Taishin. It's fine. We just need to hold on for a little longer. The situation here can't be hidden from Minister of Heaven's eyes. Someone will come to rescue us soon, replied Venerable Tian Du in Eternal Heaven City. A battle report came. Xiao Bieli looked at it, and his expression turned cold. Celestial Venerable Ling, it's your turn. Purple light gathered, and Ling Tian appeared, accepting the order respectfully. After a moment, 5 figures rushed out of Eternal Heaven City. Ling Tian led the way, and the 4 human sovereigns followed him. In Wanqing Pass, the Heavenly Mansion's army was trapped. The 6 human sovereigns protected the Yellow Springs Divine Seal, sealing off all paths of retreat. Within the Divine Seal, black poisonous mist was faintly discernible, corroding every soldier in the Heavenly Mansion's army. The shadow of death covered the entire Wanqing Pass. At this moment, 5 extremely powerful figures quickly approached from afar. Outside the Divine Seal, the 6 human sovereigns looked at each other. 3 of them stopped and turned their palms to block the leader. Back off. Celestial Venerable Ling waved her hand, and her vast true yuan shook the 3 human sovereigns back. Then she swept past them and rushed towards Wanqing Pass. The fish has taken the bait. In the distance, Hong Yi's lips curled into a cold smile, without a shred of human emotion. The nature of a devil was cruel. Ling Tian entered the battle, and the 6 human sovereigns couldn't stop him. The other 4 human sovereigns worked together to break the seal, and the Yellow Springs Divine Seal, which had lost the support of the Supreme Sovereigns, collapsed instantly. The 9 human sovereigns of the Heavenly Mansion gathered, and the 6 human sovereigns immediately retreated, not wanting to continue fighting. Retreat, Celestial Venerable Ling said solemnly. I've said it before, there's no retreat. As soon as he said that, the void shook, and Hong Yi descended from the sky with a green coffin on his back, attracting everyone's attention. Marquis Ming. The 9 human sovereigns recognized him, and their expressions darkened. With a bang, the green coffin landed on the ground. The moment it opened, a broken stone sword flew out, and a terrifying sword pressure surged out. Ningchen hid behind the green coffin and used it as a cover. He slapped the hilt of Celestial Execution Sword, and it pierced the ground. Without a word, he ran away. celestial execution sword vibrated, and a terrifying sword aura pierced thousands of feet into the ground. Under Wanqing Pass, the earth veins were destroyed, and they collapsed instantly. In the next moment, the earth energy soared into the sky, and celestial execution sword flew out, absorbing the power of the earth veins. Thousands of sword auras exploded, engulfing the entire Wanqing Pass in an instant. Hell descended on the mortal world, and thousands of soldiers of the heavenly mansion exploded in the celestial execution sword aura. Blood and chi filled the air, but they were immediately absorbed by the celestial execution sword. Blood-colored sword lights fell like rain, and there was no way out. Outside Wanqing Pass, the 6 human sovereigns of the Alliance couldn't hide their shock. They looked at the red-clothed young man in front of them, and the fear in their eyes was unprecedentedly intense. Just now, if they hadn't obeyed orders and retreated a moment later, they probably wouldn't have been able to come out now. Military advisor, when will you take back that stone sword? Sovereign Li Shan stepped forward and asked. Take it back? Ningchen smiled faintly and said, I can't take it back. This place will be a forbidden land in the mortal world from now on. Chapter 572. Wanqing Pass was covered in a bloody mist and corpses were everywhere. The forbidden land that had appeared out of nowhere had destroyed everything within. There were forbidden lands in the human world, but they were all created by the heavens and earth. This was the first forbidden land that had been created by humans for thousands and thousands of years. The words, knowing destiny, once again shocked the world. A sharp sword was easy to find, but the sharpness of a sword was the true killing weapon. The executing immortal sword was already broken and no longer had its former might. However, in the hands of a knowing destiny, it had become a true symbol of death. The eruption of the earth veins' power had pushed the executing immortal sword's power to its limits. The earth veins' power was endless, and the executing immortal forbidden land would never disappear. When the sun rose from the east, the howls in the forbidden land had completely disappeared. The first rays of the morning sun shone down, and within the bloody mist, there were scattered white bones everywhere. At this moment, even the 6 sovereigns outside Wanqing Pass couldn't bear to see this. It was the first time they had seen such a cruel scene. There's no need to regret it. Since the beginning of the war, there has been no righteous side. There's no need for fake kindness, said Ningchen calmly as he looked at the forbidden land. The sovereigns were silent. After a long while, Sovereign Wenyang said, Advisor, did the 9 sovereigns who went in all die? If sovereigns died so easily, this war would have ended long ago. They wouldn't have died so quickly, but they won't be able to come out again. Let's go back to competitive Peak City and prepare for the aftermath. After saying that, Ningchen didn't stay any longer. He turned and walked towards the north. The 6 human sovereigns looked at each other and immediately suppressed the fear in their hearts as they strode forward and followed him. They had already placed great importance on this advisor's ability, but they still underestimated him. After this battle, the Heavenly Province Army's strength had undoubtedly been greatly damaged. It would be difficult for them to have an overwhelming advantage in the future. Ning Chen and the 6 sovereigns returned to competitive Peak City. The battle report from Wanqing Pass had already been sent back ahead of time. Zhao Liusu and the other sovereigns personally came out to welcome the 7 of them. Advisor, thank you. Zhao Liusu walked up and bowed respectfully. She knew very well that if it weren't for this person, the Central Plains wouldn't have made it this far. The sovereigns and the other sovereigns can take care of the following matters. I'm tired, so I'm going back to rest. Ning Chen replied. He didn't enter the hall and instead walked towards his palace. Up ahead, Qin Ning, who had been waiting for a long time, also left. Ning Chen walked into Wenxian Palace. After sitting down, he picked up a cup of tea. His right hand trembled as he poured the tea into his mouth. Killing people isn't something to be happy about, is it? Qin Ning walked forward and poured him another cup of tea. This shouldn't be happening. Ning Chen looked at his right hand, confusion in his eyes. He was a devil, so how could he be afraid? Nature is not so easy to hide. Qin Ning handed the tea to the former and said softly, When Her Majesty and I picked you up and brought you to Weiyang Palace, you were simple and kind. We could see through you at a glance. Later on, you changed a lot. However, you just put on a mask. You haven't changed much. You still dislike war and hate killing people. I'm a devil. Ning Chen suppressed the throbbing in his heart that shouldn't be there. He took the tea and slowly said, You only have the power and body of a demon. You haven't completely lost your humanity. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been trapped by the demonic tribulation, right? Qing Ning replied, I can't have my humanity. It will destroy me. Ning Chen drank the tea in one gulp. Where's your sword? Qing Ning softly asked. Ning Chen was puzzled, but he still took out Crimson Drill Sword. Qing Ning took the sword from his hand and pointed it at her own heart. Stab it and your demonic tribulation will pass. Ning Chen suddenly stood up and threw the sword to the side. His expression was extremely gloomy. He sternly said, I don't need this method. I can pass through the demonic tribulation myself. You're too foolish. Qing Ning raised her hand and stroked the young man's cheek. A gentle smile appeared on her beautiful face as she said, If there comes a day when you need strength, you don't have to be soft-hearted. In this world, you are the only person Sister Qing Ning cares about. Only you are the most important. Do you understand? I'll say it again. I can pass through the demonic tribulation myself. I don't want to hear those words a second time. Ning Chen's expression was unprecedentedly ugly. All right, I won't mention it again. Qing Ning smiled and pulled back her hand. She turned and walked to a nearby room. Where's Ina? She should still be sleeping. It was too dangerous last night, so I didn't bring her along. Ning Chen calmed himself down. Bring her around today. You have to give her some compensation for dragging her around every day. Qing Ning smiled. Ning Chen nodded his head and agreed. With a creak, the door was pushed open. Qing Ning walked into Yiner's room and saw that she was still sleeping soundly on the bed. She couldn't help but smile helplessly. No wonder Yin didn't want to go back after coming out. What time was it now? She still hadn't gotten up. Yin, you wake up. Qing Ning walked over and softly called out. The little girl, who was still sleeping soundly, heard someone talking next to her ear. She immediately pulled the blanket over her little head and continued to sleep. I can't wake her up. Ning Chen walked over. Every time he tried to wake her up, it was always a huge problem. It's all because you indulged her too much. Qing Ning softly reprimanded. From Ming Yu to Qi to this girl, each one of them had been raised by this fellow like an ancestor. I'm just imitating the habits of the phoenix body. If I change too much, people will suspect me, said Ning Chen indifferently. Qing Ning couldn't be bothered to argue with him. She pulled the blanket aside and coaxed the girl up. Ina, how old are you this year? Asked Qing Ning as she helped the girl put on her clothes. 12 and a half. Ina rubbed her eyes. Are you married to someone? Asked Qing Ning softly. Ina's face reddened and she hastily shook her head. Oh, she's just a child. How could she be married to someone? Ning Chen interrupted. What do you know? Qing Ning glared at him. 12 years old isn't a child. Furthermore, according to etiquette, you shouldn't be here right now. How much of the things I taught you in the palace have you memorized? Ning Chen didn't dare say anything else. The palace was filled with complicated etiquette, male and female rules, and there were too many to count. It would probably take him an entire day to memorize them. If he really had to memorize these rules, it would be better for him to compete with that heaven minister. Qing Ning rubbed the girl's hair and said softly, Ino, your big brother Ning doesn't care about rules. However, in this world, women are much harsher than men. In the future, you still have to pay attention to some rules. For example, go to bed at 2 and wake up at 5. Also, if your big brother Ning casually enters your room again, kick him out. Hearing this, Ina's large eyes lit up. She nodded vigorously and said, eh. Ning Chen listened from the side and didn't say a word. After putting on her clothes, Qing Ning helped Yin to freshen up. She tied 2 beautiful bows into her braids, making the already delicate little girl look even cuter. Yin looked at her reflection in the mirror and smiled happily. All right, let's go. Qing Ning held the girl's hand and smiled. Jumped down from the stool and looked at a certain person waiting by the side. She pouted and said, "You're not allowed to drag me everywhere today. I'm not going anywhere today. I'll go wherever you want me to go." Ningchen nodded and said, "Indeed, he should compensate this lass." Running around these few days had also tormented this lass quite a bit. The three of them went out together and didn't care about the battle anymore. They held hands and walked towards the city. In front of the Hall of Venerables, Venerable Li Shan looked at between the two and frowned slightly. He didn't know why, but he felt that something was wrong. Alliance Venerable, why does the military advisor always bring that little girl from the sword-forging manor? Even for an important matter like the peace talks last time, this little girl was brought along, Venerable Li Shan asked. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. It's the military advisor's freedom to bring whoever he wants with him. If the military advisor is unhappy because of these small matters, it won't be good for anyone, Zhao Liusu warned. I understand. I'm just asking out of curiosity. I won't mention it in front of the military advisor, Venerable Li Shan replied. Zhao Liusu nodded and continued, tell the others to be careful as well. Don't get carried away just because of a great victory and put on airs in front of the military advisor again. It's true that the Central Plains won this time, but the strength of the two sides is only equal. I don't want to see competitive Peak City become the second Wanqing Pass, understand? Yes, Venerable Li Shan said respectfully. In the city, on the bustling streets, Qin Ning walked in front with while Ningchen carried something and followed behind. Countless people had experienced how terrifying a girl could be when she walked on the streets. Ningchen wasn't the first, nor would he be the last. He couldn't afford to offend Qin Ning, whether it was her original body, phoenix body, or demon body. As for he also couldn't afford to offend her when she was with Qin Ning. On the other side of the street, Shi Piaoshu, who had just returned from running errands, smiled when she saw the three of them. She said, Senior Apprentice Sister, Junior Apprentice Sister's cultivation has been progressing slower and slower since we left the mountain. Don't act recklessly. The Marquis of Jiming isn't a great evil person and has done a lot of good deeds for the world. No matter what your intentions are, if you attack him, you'll be going against the mountain's rules, Bai Lingling warned again. Great evil? That depends on what criteria you use. He turned Wanqing Pass into a forbidden area on his own. If that isn't great evil, then there really isn't any great evil, Shi Piaoshu chuckled. If he didn't do that, then the war would have continued endlessly. That's not a reason for you to attack him, Bai Lingling said in a low voice. Senior Apprentice Sister, I don't care what the reason is. What I care about is whether or not Junior Apprentice Sister can become a sovereign in this lifetime. As long as the Marquis of Jiming is alive, that possibility doesn't exist. Shi Piaoshu's smile faded and she said calmly, Junior Apprentice Sister is different from us. You can't just sever your bonds with the mortal world. If you forcefully sever them, who knows what will happen? You can't act recklessly, Bai Lingling said seriously. Shi Piaoshu was about to speak again when suddenly an extremely powerful aura appeared in the distance. The terrifying pressure caused the entire world to tremble. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.